Hi, we are back. Hopefully this will whoops. Hopefully this will be the last time we have to do this and the stream will go well. So please let us know in the chat if this is coming through okay. Sorry about that again. And we will be getting on with the show. I believe we were talking about the situation with the collapsed building in Miami. What a tragedy.
Yeah, and related note, Metro Detroit had flooding. There was severe rain. Maybe, in fact, my parents' house had a bunch of trees knocked down. Wind may be related to global warming, but could just be regular weather trends. But in Detroit, the overloaded some of the sewage system, and God forbid, people's basements flooding, and highways, roads, hundreds of cars damaged where roads have sinks. And so, me and Jennifer have mathematical engineering type bends, but unfortunately, in power, very few people have any background in engineering, and most people, have a background in politics or business. And there's only a handful. You have a handful of doctors in Congress. On a local level, Netanyahu actually was architect, but generally a very few people of engineering backgrounds in power or business. And it's problematic because the government maintaining the infrastructure generally is done by people who don't really understand it. President Biden's trying to pass this huge infrastructure plan, which may or may not work, or what's going to be. But God forbid, I think it's going to be a trend that we're going to see more and more across America. But it may not be globally, like Canada, other places around the world might not have the same problems with infrastructure, because it's that is related to the peak building boom in the U.S. is like the 70s and the 80s. Although there's modern buildings, the vast majority of suburban houses, residential apartments, and commercial buildings were built in the 70s and the 80s and are reaching the end of their lifetime. So we'll have to see towards that. And I'm not, I call myself an engineer, but I'm not a licensed engineer. And even at that level, that who has the expertise and who even cares? Who trusts the people to deal with the expertise in these situations? So unfortunately, I'm predicting that these tragedies you're probably going to see more and more across the U.S. Just due to the degenerate state of our infrastructure and buildings, and whatever reverse Flynn effect or decline of empire factors that make it very unlikely that we're going to be able to pull ourselves together to fix this infrastructure. So it looks like StreamYards is working fine, and it looks like my food.
I just can't figure out how to make it just you on the. There we go. I figured it out. Sorry, not so used to StreamYards. Got it working, and I shared the link in the chat. So Bubblegum Gun, if you want to hop on, we could have a chance to talk, because I know we were on the same stream last night there, but we didn't really get much of a chance to talk. So that would be great. And it looks like Doooovid's delicious snack will be arriving imminently. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me do a screen share. So national chain here called Qdoba. I was looking, I didn't really, it was the middle of the show, so I didn't think I could cook, and I didn't really have anything instant. I needed more than, the tradition soup. So I ordered Qdoba. I don't know if they have those across Canada. And, they have...
I used to have to go to Indianapolis all the time, so I know what Qdoba is, but I don't know if they have that in Canada.
So they have pickup in progress. I think it even has GPS. Sometimes they'll show like where the car is coming, picking up and be delivered. So really I should fast at least another like 10-15 minutes, so it's a little bit late, but so that's pretty good. So maybe it'll be good timing for Jennifer to show her stuff that she did this week. She had a bunch of diagrams, or if a guest comes on, I'll be able to stuff my face a little bit and get some energy back in. Maybe you want to go for like the 80-20 screen where it has just your tiny face and on the side, but however you want's fine.
Now I've got me as the big one. The problem is that I don't know how to switch it so that you're the big one. It's my bad. I really just don't know how this thing works here. Like, I can't get you to be the. Sorry. Do you know how to switch between the two people to make it? Because right now, if I do that layout, then it's me who's big, not you, which looks ridiculous.
Well, maybe it doesn't allow your guest to be big and you small. Or maybe you could click on like my thing on the bottom. Oh, we have a guest anyway, so.
Bubblegum Gun, what's going on, buddy? Nice to see you again. Glad you were able to make it.
Hi.
You're coming in a little low, so is there any way to make the microphone a little bit louder? You're about 20 dB lower than Doovid.
Okay, let me see, because I think I'm lagging way behind. Okay, is that better?
Yeah, can you hear him, Doov? Okay, awesome. You're coming through just fine.
Okay. I hope you're not picking up my air conditioning.
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
do you want to start with maybe introducing yourself, and we can go from there?
Sure. Well, I'm Bubble. I'm just kind of a YouTuber. Well, kind of used to be a YouTuber. Well, not a big YouTuber. I just make a YouTube poop. I'm not sure if you guys ever heard of that. It's just random funny videos on YouTube.
Yeah, I checked out your channel. It seems like you have got a lot of views on some of your videos, but you haven't uploaded in a while.
No, I started a new channel, and I want to start professionally animating, but I'm kind of a lazy guy.
Yeah, animation's tough. I started looking into Blender. I don't know if you know what that is, like a 3D rendering suite.
Yeah.
It's tough to use. Like, I don't know how you could possibly go from that to a finished animated product, because I was only able to generate a couple of diagrams. They weren't movies, so yeah, good luck on that. If you're lazy, that might not be the field for you, because I think it's a lot of work.
Gotta try it. Just fun.
It looks like you're surrounded by like some type of mechanical bunch of different, I don't know, I can't exactly tell what they are, but it reminds me of my old lab. Like a bunch of VCRs or something.
Yeah, I got a bunch of like 80s technology, because I love old 80s tech. I just love all the buttons.
You would have loved my old job. We had stuff all the way back to like the 70s and stuff. We had the things they make the voice spectrograms out of. So
yeah,
the huge. Do you know what reel to reel is? Do you have one of those?
Yeah, I don't have one, but
reel.
Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, I like that, because like they used to like draw the motherboards instead of today's motherboards, like a printer. Back then somebody actually had to like draw it, and that was really cool.
Yeah, that's true. Back in the day, they had to draw everything, and then they just started printing them. That's really neat. So you're a collector of
yeah, I like collect. Yeah, I also collect like old abandoned media, like old movies. I kind of like. I got like one movie in particular that I have like the only copy of it on English, so that's kind of cool to me. I like collecting like old stuff. I don't know, but mostly 80s stuff. That's kind of my field.
That's really cool. I also love collecting. My oldest thing that I have is a wooden box for cards from my mom's grandfather.
Like poker cards?
Well, just like playing cards. But it's like a wooden box that you store your playing cards in. So
okay, so it's
probably
like
something on a boat. I don't actually know. It's hard to tell, but it looks old. Like it's old enough that it doesn't look like something that was made recently.
Okay. Yeah, the handcrafted stuff is pretty neat. Like somebody took the time. It's like kind of blows my mind. Somebody, like the old Roman statues. Like somebody did that by hand.
I know, it's crazy. And if you look at like some of the techniques, they must have lost the techniques because they were really good for a while, and then they weren't as good after a while, because I think there was a lot of wars and probably less stability, and I guess you need a certain level of stability to have artists be able to be relaxed enough to make a good statue. But oh yeah, definitely, like Trajan, he's an older emperor before Christianity, and the statues of him are just amazing. They're lifelike. Like it's unfathomable, like especially with the hair sometimes. Like how do they do that?
Yeah.
There must have been some trick to it. That's what I'm thinking. Like there must have been some old school secret trick to it to make it that easy. Because maybe they were like pouring molds of people's heads somehow.
Yeah, there's some
it's really amazingly good.
Yeah, some really great talent. Just like, I mean, I guess when they didn't have internet back then, might as well bang on a rock for years, make it perfect.
Yeah, that's true too. They didn't have the internet to waste all their time on all day, so they
literally just like, I'm gonna bang on this rock for weekends on weekends. So yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. So
yeah, you said you were interested in the 3D periodic table. That is just great, because I thought more people would be interested in that, and a lot of people just, I don't know if they don't see it or haven't been inspired by it yet, but I don't know. I'm just sharing it right now so people can have a look at the quantum periodic table if you want to talk about that, or we can talk about something else. Normally what this stream is about is people who want to get better at streaming. Doooovid will sometimes mentor them. We also talk about like news. So the focus of the channel is mainly consciousness, science, religion, and we do talk about current events, but it's mostly Doooovid that does that. I'm more interested in like the show we were on last night. What interests me about that is learning about what it is that people believe and how they argue in favor of it, because I'm all about the arguments and the logic and the debating. So
yeah,
that's my main thing.
Yeah, I like that stuff too. I mean, you don't have to be 100% right. You just have to like some really like eureka moment, and that's what I look for. Like, for example, Walter Russell. Some of his stuff is a bit cultish, but like doesn't mean he was wrong and everything. He had like that one eureka moment that the 3-dimensional periodic table, and I kind of see where he's getting at from there.
Well, yeah, because we live in 3D.
Yeah.
Just to break in here a second, somehow my order didn't work. It looks like they canceled my order. So I put it in like 3 hours ago to be delivered at a specific time.
Jesus, that's a lot of bucks.
But so maybe I'm going to prepare and to try to make a little bit of food. So I'm just going to put myself on mute. And I'm going to listen to you talk. I'm going to try to prepare something to eat because I'm hungry. Eating all day.
All right. That is got a whole library. Okay, there's even more books.
Yeah, he's a merchant on Amazon, I think.
He sells books.
He is a collector of books, but he also sells some of them. So I think the ones you're seeing on hanging up there on the shelf, those are probably his personal collection, but I know he also has quite a bit of books for sale on his Amazon. So yeah, I've got Walter Russell up here. I've never heard of this guy, so I have no idea what he did. I don't see any pictures of his periodic table, but it does look like he has a Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it looks like he did a spiral periodic table.
Yeah. And it would kind of like spiral down. Yeah, like that. Kind of like.
Yeah, so this is the one I was talking about, that it had something connected to the octaves of music?
Actually, his was kind of based around the Fibonacci sequence, I believe. So in that way, I forgot the argument I heard from it. It was let's see if I can find it. It said basically when the elements of the periodic table are standing waves that can bond together over a period of time. Time is a continuous being formed by spontaneous absorption of emissions of light waves of EMR. One thing, I don't believe in light emits, because I wouldn't say light is being emitted. I would say light is like kind of like sound. You're not actually shooting sound into my ears. You're like making percussions that disturb the ether. I heard some people call it that, and then it goes into your ears. It vibrates. But I'm not shooting something.
Yeah, there's no such thing. Like, I think what you're saying is that there's no such thing as sound. What we experience as sound is the rendering of the transverse vibrations, right?
Yeah, because when you hit the water, you're not actually shooting some kind of waves through the water, but it's just like a disturbance in that kind of field.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Light is hard to understand, I think, because we have like a particle model, and light doesn't really move around as a particle. Like, we have this thing which is called c, which is the, quote, maximum speed of light, but that kind of assumes that things are moving in a linear way when they're not necessarily. That's not necessarily a fact. So that's an issue with this approach to science that.
Yeah. So somebody said. Somebody said it wasn't traveling, but it should be considered an induction of light. It's not a traveling light, but inductive, like kind of like heat. It's being. I'm not sure if that makes sense to you. Inductive.
Well, what do you mean by induct? Because induction to me is a derivative concept in electromagnetic field theory. So induction is something that requires a bunch of things to be pre-existing. So what do you mean by induction exactly?
Well, like, for example, light doesn't have a speed, but it has an induction rate.
Okay. I see what you're saying. That's a bit different of an assertion because it's not clear to me what that means either. But I'm trying to find a diagram that gets my point across, but I'm not actually sure where it is. So I might have to give up on that because just trying to find something at the last second doesn't always work. But I'll just give it one last shot to see, because I mean, I do think there is such a thing as space and such a thing as time, but it's just not what we think it is because we only experience it subjectively. So the only reason that time is the way that it is in our own minds, and that we can look at watches and clocks and agree on what that means, that says more about our own subjectivity as humans than it does about the realness of light.
Yeah, because like our body's just a tool. Because our body's just a tool, and we're just experiencing the universe through it. Yeah,
basically what I was saying is that we don't really know where time is being instantiated. Like, is time something that exists latently in the universe, or is time something that we impose on the measurements that we make? And I think what you're alluding to maybe is that time is something that is facilitated by light. Like, instead of saying that light is traveling at a constant speed, you could say that time is sort of unfolding through light. Like, the fact that light goes from one place to another is the proof that time has passed. So you could start to look at it as a question of, well, does light create time, or does time create light? And that's something where most people are just going to say, well, obviously time creates light, because time is always the independent variable, right? Like in math, when you do a Cartesian plane, the x more times than not, sorry, not in math, in physics, the x-axis more times than not is time, the independent axis. So since time is considered independent, everything depends on time. So everything is caused by time. Time is the causer. But what if that's not actually how it works? What if light is the first cause and time ends up being caused by light? Now, I'm not saying that's necessarily how it works, but why wouldn't that be right? Could that be right? And could our belief to the contrary merely be a symptom of our subjectivity as humans, right?
Yeah. I feel like that kind of steps into the whole Matrix kind of thinking. Because, like, you know.
That was hilarious, because when I went on Modern Day Debate or whatever, they were like, someone made that comment. They're like, oh, yeah, she's saying it's the Matrix. I'm like, what the heck does that mean?
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, like, because computers, it's like saying, is a light bulb inside a computer, inside a video game, is that light bulb kind of real? You know, because it's still light.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the way I would put it is that the periodic table is real in a more fundamental sense than what we experience as time is real. Now, obviously, what we experience as time is real in some sense because we can make clocks. It's got to represent something. The question is what? So what I was saying is the most fundamental level of the universe is this thing called the measurement limit, which is 3 plus 1. And the idea with the periodic table is that it is based on a 3 plus 1 meta geometry, because you have one sphere in the middle, and then on either side you have 2 squared spheres, and then the next one is 3 squared spheres, and then the next one is 4 squared spheres, and you have 2 on either side. So it's kind of like a hypersymmetric object, if you can sort of see it that way, because it's like 100% symmetrical about the origin there. So my argument is basically the same thing that makes the periodic table have that shape, 3 plus 1, that's the same factor or cause that makes us experience 3 dimensions of space and 1 dimension of time in the way that we do.
Oh,
and
okay.
The reason why we don't see this doubleture that you see in the quantum periodic table is because we have 2 eyes. We have, like, I forget how they call it. It's not perfect symmetry as humans. It's like symmetry adjacent, right? Because we're pretty much symmetrical as humans, but our digestive systems aren't 100% symmetrical. They're more cyclical.
What?
But basically, like, the doubleture of the periodic table that's present objectively is sort of assimilated into us vis-a-vis our axis of symmetry, if that makes sense. So to me, it doesn't really make sense, because, like, how the hell does that work? It's extremely confusing. It's more just like, this is what I found, and I'm trying to make sense of it. So let's all put our heads together and figure out what this means. Maybe it doesn't mean anything. Maybe it's just a way for us to understand the universe more deeply, and, you know, in a couple thousand years we'll get one more scrap of insight into this thing. But for now, it's pretty usable to do predictions of chemical reactions, because the noble gases, do you know what those are, Bubble?
Yeah, kind of. Not big on the physics and biology.
Well,
chemistry.
They're unreactive. So just do you know what that means? Unreactive. So, like, reactive is like chlorine or whatever, sodium. You put it in water, it explodes. So unreactive is the opposite of that. So on this periodic table, the noble gases, which are the unreactive ones, they would be at the dots, right, on that line in the middle. He's calling it the inertial line. So on my diagram, the inertial points are when, like, right now this is completely filled, and so if you started taking away some of these, like if you just had the one central sphere, it would be helium. And so each time one of these 7 slices is filled, that's the stable state. So the idea is that the universe is always tending towards a stable state, what is known as a maximum entropy state. And so my approach is basically finding the geometry of systems and then being able to predict what is the stable state based on what I already know about stable states. Like, for instance, the sphere is the universal most stable state because it's the most symmetric object.
Okay. So
we have this tendency of things, if there's no energy going into a system will just tend towards a spherical shape because that's the shape that balances out all the torsion, which is like a spinning power. It's the physical term for that.
It's I'm trying to get that, but it's a little bit difficult. Oh, sorry, 1 second.
Come look at it. Oh, wait.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I have the exact same feelings about it. It's so complicated, but just because we can't understand it, the entire thing from, the ground up, maybe that's not something we can do as humans. We can still use the knowledge that it gives us. Like, this tells us that there's not going to be any elements past 118. Why? Because the thing is full. And that's how full, there won't be any more elements than 118 for the same reason there won't be any physical dimensions than 3. It's inconceivable to go into a fourth physical dimension because there's only 3, right?
Well, unless you consider time another dimension.
I do, but it's not a physical dimension. I agree that time is the dimension. There's no doubt about it. It's just not a physical dimension. Space is the physical dimension, right? Because space is the one that we actually have the physical evidence for, whereas time, we just have the evidence that space is changing, and therefore we're saying, oh, okay, that's because time is going forward. So I completely agree with you, but in that same sense, like, from 3D, how do we go into a fourth physical dimension? It doesn't make any sense, right? Because they're full. That's as full as things can get. Time can go forward, but it's still 3 dimensions going forward in time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I can't really get it. I'm not very good at physics, but yeah, I think I'm understanding a list.
Well, basically, nobody is very good at physics because as humans, we're smarter than all the other animals, but it turns out the animals aren't really all that smart, are they?
Yeah, we don't really have much competition. But
we don't have a lot of competition. That is very true. And we don't really know how smart we are in an absolute sense, right? Like, we can say, I'm so much smarter than this rock. I'm so much smarter than this amoeba, this dog, this elephant. But we don't know, how smart we are relative to the universe.
Well, I think maybe the aliens do got to figure it out. Like, I mean, if they're traveling here,
yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying to my husband the other day. I'm like, I don't think you want aliens coming here because, it's probably a bad sign. They're probably on their way to ransack the planet. Because if they're if they have superior tech to be able to come here, we wouldn't stand a chance in a war with them.
Well,
we can't do that. We don't even have a permanent settlement on the moon right now. Yeah. We don't have much. So if some aliens came here with advanced tech, we'd be screwed. And probably we'd be their slaves or all dead, and our planet would be some sort of mine.
I mean, the only resource that could be valuable to them is probably the planet.
Yeah, we're kind of using that at the moment.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm like, you better hope that there's no aliens coming, because we're screwed if they're coming here. They're light years ahead of us technologically, because we haven't even started to look at what that would take to put a human in deep space like that.
But if they do come and they're like somehow just kill us all, we could just like spook them out of the planet, just like scare them as ghosts, like, oh, boo.
Yeah, exactly. If you fucking aliens come here, I'm gonna haunt your ass for all eternity because I got nothing else to do. So screw you, aliens. I win. Okay, if you let your enemies kill you, you win. Oh wait, but you got to haunt them as ghosts afterwards.
Yeah,
that ensures your victory. So Doooovid, how's it going? Are you have you gotten to eat a few things, or are you still munching there?
Yeah, I got a little food in me. I guess hopefully I'll get a refund for my delivery. But yeah, I just made a soup and I'm heating up a calzone.
You are literally a first-hand victim of the decay of modern America, Doovid. The utter neglect of your Esbaro order. Did I get that right?
Qdoba,
excuse me.
But yeah, I mean, I guess like if you differentiate between like the actual understanding of how the universe works versus the function of a human or an animal, say what does it mean to be intelligent, to be able to fill like a form determines function, to fulfill the essential function, what it means to be human, as opposed to understanding the answers to how the universe works, or complex concepts in science and technology. And it might be related to like a form determines function, because understanding science can build technology and change the way we live. But yeah, I mean, me and Jennifer like pure science, a theoretical understanding of how all things work, and which is essentially separate from the body, because there's things like the measurement limit or observation effect, but the idea is that certain laws of how the universe works are independent of us, and in fact that the human body is not really made to understand these things. Possibly the human mind and concepts like the soul, the origin of consciousness, where these ideas even exist. Do they arise from the brain or from another realm? And it was like Justin the other week, if you're saying like like a pantheistic or even a dualistic interpretation, where the answers to all questions reside internally, because we have a soul, and the soul is connected to everything in the universe. So you could internally introspect and have the answers, so to say, revealed as through some sort of scientific method of trying to interpret the outside world that we live in. And presumably that is extremely limited in our ability to reach truth through that.
Yeah, so Doovid and I met on a live stream a few years ago, and we started streaming together because we both have an interest in theology and consciousness studies and science. So we're at this for a while, and this is episode number, I don't even know, but we're up there. So yeah, that's what we do. So yeah, I don't know if you want to stick around, Bubbles, and talk about some more stuff if you had more questions, or we can talk another time. It's up to you.
Sure. I mean, I could talk about anything. I'm not much of a physics person, so it's the basics. But well, I mean, what else you guys talk about?
Well, this is week in review, so we try to review our streaming and other relevant streaming. So if you kind of give an overview maybe of your streaming history, if you don't want to give too much personal information, that's fine.
No.
But just what you said a little like a graphic design or the various things, but what is your main goal in streaming? What type of content have you been producing recently? What type of shows do you watch? If you're just producing graphical stuff, or if you're actually streaming yourself, what kind of people are you talking with? And because it's your first time on Week in Review, so I mean we usually do week by week of reviewing the last week and previewing the next week. But if you want to review a longer period of time and even preview what your goals are, at least for streaming over the next period of time.
Well, it's my first one, so I guess I don't really have a history there. But yeah, I mean, I can. I mostly do politics. That's why I go to Modern Day Debate. I kind of like go there every time they have a debate. I think mostly there for the creationist theism debates, and I guess I do a little bit of consciousness talk, but not that much.
Do you have leanings in the creationist evolution debate?
Yeah, I'm a creationist, but I wouldn't subscribe to any particular god. I mean, I wouldn't deny they don't exist, but I do think there is some sort of esoteric battle that seems to be going on between all the different gods of each religion, and I find that kind of interesting because some people, if you kind of push them on it, do admit there is some sort of esoteric battle between their gods.
Really?
Yeah, this is something. This is something you can. I mean, the whole Nazi thing was the Jewish God versus their pagan gods. Even in ancient Rome, it was their Greek gods or their Roman gods. And then even in Aztec culture, it was like the Aztec culture god versus the whatever Mayan, whatever god down the forest was worshiping.
Interesting.
So you take a biblical approach to creationism, or are you more pagan pantheist, or?
Well, I don't really subscribe to anything, but I don't think I want to deny them yet. Because some of them do say, like, hey, I have experienced my God from Hindu to Christian, Muslim.
Was it modern day debates more Christian leaning? Most of the creationists are arguing in favor of biblical, the 7 days of creation, Noah, flood story, as opposed to Vedic or indigenous world traditions that might have different cosmologies. Typically, they use the terms young Earth creationist, referring to biblical creationists. That it's about 5,800 years old, the world, versus old Earth creationist. That would be a Vedic model, where you say the world was created as is, but is billions of years old. And sometimes, it's just the meaning of words, because like, is the Big Bang? Could you be a creationist and believe in the Big Bang, and that the world was created through the Big Bang, like a guiding principle, or you're saying that the world, the Earth, was created as is and didn't go through some evolutionary process?
Yeah, because it is about proving which God has more evidence for them. Oh. That's catchy.
Yeah, pretty much. So they end up having a lot of conversations about that, and like, what proves God and how do we prove God? And it seems to return to this cosmological argument. And I've also seen the argument of, the logical, blobbable guy who came on the shit channel for like 3 hours to scream at me that because DNA is complicated, therefore God. There's that argument too. I guess it's like an argument from complexity, some type of anthropocentric, because we're so advanced, we must have had an intelligent creator type of argument.
Well, are you denying or pro against the DNA? Was he pro or against the DNA argument? It being complex.
He was saying that because DNA is complicated, therefore God.
Well, it's not just that it's complicated, it's that it's digital. And by digital, they don't mean ones and zeros, but that it has it's a language that can be comparable to that of computers.
Right, which I don't accept that.
Well, yeah, I kind of do, because like it's if it's programmed, somebody has to program it. And that's assuming
that things are based on how Shannon information is modeled, which is that there's a source, a signal, and a receiver. That's not how the universe is built. It has integrated computing. It doesn't have linear computing, and source signal receiver is linear.
Linear. I mean, because
you're going from the source to the, you're going from the encoder to the decoder, and the thing in the middle of the encoder and the decoder is a signal. That's what Shannon information measures, is the fidelity of the transmission of encoded signals.
Well,
so
the creator doesn't really have to be inside the universe.
Right, but then you're back with the religious people who are making a claim to an extra universal God, and that has no evidence.
Well, yeah, it doesn't have any evidence, but it can't be debunked neither. And if something's powerful enough to kind of start life in code, it sounds like he's kind of a really smart guy, for sure.
Or it just happens naturally with no intervention whatsoever.
Well, it's statistically impossible, and I don't believe in coincidence.
It's not about statistics. Like, it's not something you can model with statistics, because you're saying, well, I know what the probability is of this universe existing, and that's framing the question incorrectly, because the probability of this universe existing is 100%. The probability of any other universe existing is 0%. And people that say different are just really misunderstanding the nature of what percentages and likelihood actually means. It's trying to introduce a problem where none exists.
Well, it's kind of saying like things like, for example, I'm trying. Let's see how I can phrase this. For example, it's saying like, let's say I'm trying to hit on a girl, and she says, "You have 0 chance." And then I ask her, "Was like that 1 in a million?" Like, and she said, "Yeah, 1 in a million." It's still a no, even though there's a chance. It's still basically a limitless no. It's even though it's just we are living in that 1 out of a million chance that does happen. It's really impossible. It's basically saying no, it's not possible, unless you have some sort of hand of God.
Yeah, sure. I mean, a lot of people want to believe that, but really it's just a substitute for not understanding mechanically what's going on. Like, I don't think that those arguments about a God are really going to give anybody, or going to convince anybody who isn't already convinced, because you're introducing more questions than answers. It's like, well, why are we so complicated? Well, because God. Okay, so that's an additional thing that you don't know anything about, that you haven't given any information about. So you're overcomplicating the problem to introduce a God. At that stage, you might as well just focus on the biology and figure out how the biology works, and just saying God did it because you don't understand how biology works, that's not going to convince anybody.
Well, the thing is that biology is complicated, and
I know it's complicated, but once people accept the measurement limit and how light actually works, that it won't be as complicated anymore. It'll be something that people can actually start to approach, and they'll see how life works. Like, I actually have a model here. I'll have to show it in a minute, though. I can't put the camera on right now, but I will put it on later and show how DNA works, and how we can predict the shape of DNA using very simple light waveforms. So, yeah, Doooovid, did you want to hop in here and state your thoughts? Did you get a chance to finish your meal there? I see you're still muted.
I had a little soup and some honey pistachios, and I have the calzone, should be ready in like 10 minutes. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty difficult to set up a complete epistemology to exchange knowledge. And so if you're working with science and the scientific method and empiricism and what can be independently tested and verified in the physical realm versus an internal introspection or revealed tradition. So like I'm advancing what I call the multiple truth hypothesis as a way to understand multiple conflicting ideas at the same time. So if you're going to reject anything but the scientific method and repeatable, observable effects that could be demonstrated in the material realm, versus if you're going to give credence to scriptures, religion, or even your internal experience. But just to have a conversation, it's important to be able to correctly identify the origin of your beliefs. So if you're stating things that are based upon your internal connection to God or some sort of tradition, wise men, elders, prophets, to clarify that, and then the people you're talking to might reject your axioms. So even hypothetically, say, okay, I reject your axiom. However, for the sake of conversation, I could at least assume your axioms for the sake of having a dialogue. So that's what I'm calling a multiple truth hypothesis, a framework to allow people to do that.
Yeah, that's Doovid's baby, is his multiple truth hypothesis. He's working on his theory to estimate the likelihood of the truth of a statement using a multiple axiom framework. So.
Oh yeah, I would say I do have multiple axioms. For example, I don't believe in coincidence. I don't believe even if there are billions of universes, I would say every single, statistically speaking and logically speaking, they would all have no life. There's no reason for it to have life unless there was an outside programmer creating life. Also, we can, in the existence of ghosts, why are there ghosts? Even if out of those millions of universes, one that did have life naturally occurring, why is there ghosts in the program? I don't think nature would program a ghost.
Well, sure it would. It would be conservation of energy, because you have a mind in your body, and then when your body dies, you're just a mind. And so if one of those minds interfaced in some way with reality, then they might call that a ghost.
Well, it can serve
I don't
energy,
think ghosts. I think ghosts prove consciousness. I think ghosts prove that consciousness is a light waveform, but I don't think that ghosts prove God. I think God is really a choice you have to make at the end of the day.
Well, it's the most rational one, because even though you're conserving light, there's no reason to conserve the consciousness.
Yeah, there is. Conservation of energy is a universal law.
Yeah, you can conserve energy, but where does it say this energy has to be point source?
That's just a consequence of the total internal refraction of light. So it'll become a point. It's not a point source. It's a finite geometry. So like the food that you eat, all that energy goes into you. Some of it is dissipated as heat, but it goes through you essentially. So it's the energy from the food, which ultimately comes from light, right? Because sun makes everything grow. That light, fundamentally light energy, is totally internally refracted into you when you eat, which keeps the energy in your body and in your mind.
Kind of I don't believe light comes into you. It's like the whole argument again. It's not sound coming into you, but it's not my voice reaching out to your ears. It's just me causing a disturbance in the medium, and then
and now you're changing the subject off of consciousness and you're back on sound. So nothing is going to prove God. That doesn't prove God, I'm afraid.
No,
there's just no way to prove God that way, because you could prove it all using physics and say, here's the physics, step 1, step 2, step 3, and work it all out like that. There's no need for something external to come in and alter it. And even at that, like, these God people aren't saying how God did it. They're not really solving any of the questions in a way that science would accept the solution, right? Because the solutions in science have to be geometry.
Yeah, well, even by your kind of like method, computers are just like lights being programmed. So we can assume that there's a God with just a mega computer, and we're inside that computer.
You could assume that, but you're assuming it with no evidence. So it's outside of the domain of science. And you're welcome to do that because plenty of people believe unscientific things, and maybe there's some merit to that, but it doesn't mean that anybody's going to be convinced on the basis of science. And I think that science is really the only way to convince people, other than emotions.
No, I'm saying, but it's a more probable than the computer building itself.
I don't think you can make assertions of probability. Like, I think that is a fallacious notion that you can know the probability ad hoc.
Yeah.
The probability of life arising on Earth is 100%. That's the only probability you can really talk about. So to say that that's a more likely or less likely, that, well, then what?
I don't think it can arise by itself. You can create life on Earth, but it arising by itself, no.
Well, that's like saying, how did the Earth arise? It couldn't have arisen by itself. But we have no problem believing that the Earth arose by itself.
Well, you can question that. It depends. Do you believe in the Big Bang theory kind of thing? Like, which theory do you believe in?
Well, of course not. That's a religious idea. That's not a scientific idea.
Yeah, but
the Big Bang is fundamentally a creationist metaphysics.
I wouldn't say it's creationist.
Well, it is, because the Big Bang is the creator. The Big Bang created the universe. That's what creationist metaphysics is. It's one thing that made everything. That's what creationist meant.
Well, another thing could be just the creator created a Big Bang, or a creator popped. I don't know. I don't know which theory is right. I can't speak there.
Well, the theory that is scientific is uncreated universe.
Uncreated,
so everything that's here has always existed in some form. That's the scientific one, because science says that there's conservation of energy. So energy can't be created or destroyed, and neither can matter.
Well,
and so if it exists, it's uncreated.
Well, that might be true inside our little bubble, but who's to say that's true outside?
Well, you're speculating, so you're back to being outside of the domain of science. So it's like, this is what happened on the show last night. It's like every single turn of the conversation was people trying to drag us outside of science and into random speculation. It's like, why do you care about what happens in another universe if you don't even know what's going on in this one?
Well, one thing we do know that happens in this universe is decay.
Yes, and there's also assimilation. It's not just decay.
But even the assimilation will decay. Everything will decay.
That doesn't mean that assimilation isn't a thing.
Yeah, but it assimilates, but it'll decay more than it assimilate, which is, I mean.
And that is a statement you can only make locally.
Well, entropy, the expanding universe, is saying we're decaying faster than
we're assimilating. Well, again, that depends how you define it, because gravity is holding us together pretty well, isn't it?
Well, gravity is just time. Gravity only exists because of time divergence.
I think gravity exists because of matter having mass pulling itself together.
I completely disagree there. The new accepted theory is that gravity is just time turning onto itself.
Right.
Bending into itself. Well, it makes sense. I think it's a better theory. Let's see how would I explain it. Because time only because there is no linear time. It's just.
Well, I agree with you. Time's not linear, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Yeah, and what we're calling gravity is just space, because it's space time. It's just bending into itself.
Right. So if you're so sure about that, you should prove it rather than just repeating it. Because right now it just sounds like you're repeating something from a book, and it's like, doesn't really make much sense to me.
Oh no! Like, oh yeah. I mean, this is a video. Like, I'm not. This, but the idea is that the mass is creating a time divergence in space time, and that divergence is what we perceive to be gravity.
And that makes no sense to me. So I don't think it makes any sense to you either. It's just gibberish. Maybe people say that I say word salad. Did you hear that? That's some literal nonsense. And yet I'm the one accused of word salad. So think about that for a second.
Well, I mean, the idea is simple.
It's not simple at all. I mean, you can barely get it out, and I have no clue what you're talking about. You're saying that time creates gravity. Okay, prove it. You can't.
I can, because gravity is just time bending into itself. Because, for example, black holes, we know...
Right, so time bending into itself, time doesn't have a direction. So right off the hop, you're not making any sense. Because itself implies a center, a directionality. That doesn't make any sense to me. Time doesn't have a direction. Space has a direction.
But it's a divergence. For example, there's time here that's flowing slower, and there's time here that's flowing faster. So the divergence...
Well, that's an effect of gravity. That's a time dilation effect of gravity.
Yeah.
Because gravity has an associated energy, and the more energy is put into a system, it affects the space and time, the observation of space and time. It doesn't mean that gravity is time. Like, I'm not even sure what you're saying.
No, I'm saying that gravity is a divergence. It's a
right. So again, divergence vector. Where? What is diverging? Like, divergence implies geometry.
Yeah. No, the divergence in time. Time is a dimension. So
I know time's the dimension, but that doesn't mean that it has a direction. Divergence implies directionality, therefore can only exist in space.
That's the thing. The time flowing through here is let's say this time is flowing slower than the time flowing over here. So if that divergence creates a force vector that we perceive to be gravity.
Doovid, you want to hop in here? I don't think I'm getting anything across here. Not going anywhere.
Yeah, I take a more, like I'll recognize some level of truth to anything that comes out of anybody's mouth, as opposed to more like, because an objective kind of like Jennifer trying to, like walk you through some sort of science training. And if you don't have educational background, like a degree in science or, like having worked hundreds of physics problems, mathematics, it's difficult to see things. And also, if your ideas or your world understanding, isn't systematized, and very few people have a systematized understanding of the world, because you really have to spend years thinking things through, reading, talking it out, and you just have like a collection of beliefs and understandings, and you may not even know the origins of the things that you believe. Like some of them you might have thought yourself, some you might have heard from your parents or teachers or read in different books, but if you don't have the recall of this is where I have this information, and then you have inconsistent, incoherent worldview, which is really basically everybody does, but at certain levels. So it's processes like this that you have to go through to develop a consistent, coherent worldview. And it was mentioned earlier, if you're just this question of truth or knowledge, what's the origin of knowledge? And you're saying if you're taking a view that it has to be scientific, so what I think in essence means nothing. What could you prove? What could you demonstrate? And how are you communicating it? And so it's difficult even to have basic levels of communication about these ideas. And then even I have beliefs about very complicated ideas of science, and because we all live in the material realm, so we all have some sort of understanding about how the world we live in operates. Like it's called pattern recognition, dissonance. You were raised into ignorance, and as we grow up and see more of the world, we put together patterns automatically. And, so to say, are the patterns correct or not, or even are there correct patterns? And then even if scientifically, so, okay, this is the truth scientifically, but can you correspond your internal beliefs to, so to say, an objective truth, like science, like, T-jump or something, like, atheism, I speak on behalf of science and objectivity, but there really is no such phenomenon. Even if you're a great scientist, you can't correspond all of the person's actions based on some sort of science or objectivity. Like, I just follow the science, and then I train myself to do scientifically what's objectively the best thing to do. So most of these conversations are kind of like a dead end. And even like the modern day debate, it comes little show, and there's some zingers, and people play to their own audiences versus some sort of more actual exchange of information. Like, presumably everybody in the world has recognized patterns that other people haven't recognized. So you've been through the world and have certain experiences and understandings of the world that other people don't have. And then how do you communicate it? And so you have to go through these kind of like grueling processes of understanding what a person's worldview is. And if you take the scientific view, because people, it sound like, of course I'm scientific, of course I'm logical. I was even on Right Reaction a few times this week and last week, and we were talking about that. But if you say, well, no, the origins of my beliefs are not necessarily scientific and logical. They have a different source, and people just portray that their beliefs are logical and scientific, even though that's not really the origin of the idea. So, if you've had many of these conversations or went through these processes of, like Jennifer kind of like trying to T-jump you, and, like you're handing in a paper of your ideas, and then she's going to hand it back to you with a bunch of red X's on it or something like that. But, that's the process that you have to go through to develop a consistent, coherent worldview.
Yeah. Like I was saying, this is the new this is the new accepted theory that I try to say what
like arguing for the authority of a new accepted theory of some random YouTube video that you watched. Like, do you really think that's going to convince us? We're going to be convinced only by logic.
It doesn't matter if it's
citing the authority of some YouTube video or some book is completely misunderstanding the point. The point is to go through step by step and expound on why your opinion must be the correct one.
Yeah, I mean, these YouTubers aren't.
Well, this is the accepted view. It's like, no, it's not. There's no accepted view on this stuff.
No, this is the new view. This is the. It doesn't matter if it came from a YouTuber. Like, it's just appealing to numbers. They're like number of subscribers. Doesn't really matter. But the new theory is it has backing. It's not like he put out his butt or anything. It's YouTuber who does his research, and this is.
What did I just say?
That YouTuber, it wouldn't matter if it comes from a random YouTuber.
That what matters is logic.
Yeah.
So trying to substantiate the credibility of the source of your arguments is not going to help bolster your argument. What's going to bolster your argument is logic.
Yeah, well, no, I'm saying he's clearly using logic. Now I'm trying to tell you that logic. I'm not the physicist. He's the physicist. I'm getting what he told.
So you're not really in a position to evaluate whether he's right or not.
No, but it's the most reasonable theory I heard so far for gravity.
But you also believe a God created life. So who are you to speak on reasonable theories?
Well, it's the most plausible reasonable theory.
Says who? You have to invoke magical causes to explain something complex? No, that's not the most plausible theory.
What? Because it wouldn't make sense for the universe to create itself in final order.
Well, what if it always existed?
Because you don't because you don't have to have order. You're presupposing order. And to presuppose order,
Yeah,
you presuppose a God.
I don't need to presuppose order. I can go out in the universe, find the periodic table, realize it's the only thing that concretely exists, and conclude that since it possesses order, the natural structure of the universe is order.
Well, you're presupposing the order of those elements. Somebody,
right, and what are you going to presuppose, that there was a period when the periodic table didn't exist? I'm going to say prove it, and you're not going to be able to. You can presuppose things like the periodic table. It's pretty clear it's real. You have to presuppose things for any argument. Okay, any argument requires the presupposition of axioms. I'm presupposing that the periodic table exists. I think I'm on pretty solid ground.
Yeah, but all order requires an authority.
No, it really doesn't, and the periodic table is actually proof of that.
How so?
Because it exists and it didn't need to be designed. It's just there.
Well, that's a bit circular.
So is your argument. All arguments are circular within their own axioms. That doesn't make them wrong.
Sure, you could, but then it just becomes valid as an external God.
No, it's not. The external God is additional complexity. Science prefers solutions of lower complexity.
Well, you have to have a higher complexity to create a lower complexity.
Says who?
That's just I got supply and demand.
I'm pretty sure Wolfram actually disproved that, because his model is able to create complex systems from simple rules.
Well,
so that's not a fact. Entropy implies you can get complexity out of simplicity.
But you're violating this law of supply and demand at that point.
I don't think I am. You're just making a presupposition about primacy. You're saying, well, the complex must emanate the simple, and I'm saying no.
Well, it doesn't.
You can anecdotally disprove that through Wolfram's research, which literally gives anecdote that is not how things work. The simple can generate the complex. What's not clear is whether the complex can generate the simple. So you're the one presupposing something with no evidentiary basis. At least I have one anecdote. Wolfram's work on its own is just an anecdote, but it's still an anecdote, right? You don't even have one.
But then you're doing the same thing I did earlier, which is just appealing to like a YouTuber. I don't know his work.
He's okay. Yes, he has a YouTube channel, but the guy's devoted his life to implementing like various mathematical methods and theoretical physics, right? He has, I don't want to say devotees, but he has students who
it sounds like
take his work seriously.
Okay.
I'm not saying that he himself is the reason why that is substantiated. What I'm saying is that he's actually done work where he took simple rules, did a simulation, and got complex structures out of it. So we have a precedent for that being possible. Now, that doesn't mean that it necessarily translates to reality, because it's just a computer simulation, but it's a good start.
Well, what is the experiment? Because I see some of these experiments. I've been pointing to multiple
simulation. He wants to build the universe up from what he calls Rulial space, which is basically a.
I'm trying to figure out how his software works.
The point being, I don't want to go into how his software works, but the point being that you don't have any basis to assume that you need something complex for something simple. You don't have a basis to make that assertion.
I got to know how the software works. I've been pointed to somebody told me the Tower of Babel as a way to debunk the monkeys on the typewriter. Have you heard of that argument?
I'm not sure that it's an argument, but I'm familiar with the idea of the monkeys, infinity monkeys, eventually producing Shakespeare's works through sheer chance.
And then somebody brought up the argument that the Tower of Babel was used to debunk that, but then I looked at how it was programmed, and it was totally false. They didn't understand how that software was programmed. And if they would have just known, this doesn't debunk, it's not a good counter argument to the 1,000 monkeys on the typewriter. So I want to know how his software works. What is the logic of the software?
The logic is multiple iterations, aka simulation, of simple rules generating complex objects.
So is simulation random, or is the simulation like alphabetical, numerical, or is it completely random?
It's reiterating the same method over and over and over again.
Yeah, but you can have a simulation if it's random. You can be doing that thing again and again and again, and it has a large possibility you could just be doing the same simulation again and not changing. They could also be, it could be 50-50. It could be just completely random. It could be 1 in 100, the same simulation. So how is it working? Completely random, or is there?
There's no you can't code randomness because the universe is founded on order. You can't code randomness. You can only do a pseudo random number generator. Okay. Wolfram's thing has nothing to do with that. It's the same thing. The rules are set. He reiterates the rules numerous times. The numerous reiterations of the rules trace out a complex geometry starting from a basis of simple rules, thus establishing a precedent for the complex being generated from the simple. You wanted to state the opposite. I'm saying that's an assertion with no basis and an anecdotal counter evidence.
No, I want to know.
The Wolfram anecdote is not a BTFO, but it's saying to you that your assumption that it's the complex that makes the simple has no basis.
Well, I have to know if this software is true or legit, because
it's not about the software. It's about whether your position has a basis to be a reasonable axiom, and it doesn't, and I'm giving you an anecdote to indicate why.
The thing, your argument is only legit if the software is legit. Because I've been shown these kinds of random software. It turns out they're not random. They don't really get how the software works, how it was programmed, and it's not a random software. It's predestined, you could say.
Anyway, I think I don't know how much longer I want to haggle about this, but
maybe move to a different argument.
What do you think, Doovid? Are you still eating there? I think Doovid is super hungry.
Yeah, I'm still eating. Do you want to show your slides?
Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that Wolfram, you're saying, it's not necessarily a discovering truth or any fundamentals. It's just a method for.
Like, Doovid, did you understand my argument? Like, I felt like I was taking crazy pills there. Did you understand what I was saying?
Yeah, I think so. But I think the Wolfram isn't. It's just a method for making calculations that may or may not, so to say, be true, and so to say, a different direction towards science and trying to figure out fundamental laws of how things work versus being able to make correct calculations, even to. Regardless of whether it's true or not.
Thinking,
like I said, most science these days is really just statistical methods.
Yeah. Scientists are just paid to make guesses. Whichever guess is the gooderest at the time, kind of go with that. The gooderest guess.
Okay, so this is a diagram that I wanted to quickly touch on. It's not the main one I want to go over today, but basically sheaths, right? So we have this idea that everything tends towards a sphere. Everything, quote, wants to be a sphere. There's a will in the universe to be a sphere. So the sun, it's almost a sphere, right? Got not much going on, sort of.
Well, you could say it's a sphere because of centrifugal divergence.
But it's not a perfect sphere, which is the point, that perfect spheres are not observable. They are in the ideal realm, not the concrete realm. So the sun is in the concrete realm. How do we know that? Well, we can look up and there it is, right? So the reason why the sun is spherical and I am not is because the sun is monad adjacent. And it's monad adjacent because it really doesn't have much going on. Like if we compare the sun to the Earth has the oceans, the land masses, just a crazy amount of complexity, everything sort of moving around, Brownian motion style, whereas the sun is really just, I mean, it does have some patterns on it, but it's a lot more simple of a system, right? So simplicity is a matter of monadic proximity. So the closer a system can be, the fewer deformations it takes. So basically you're starting with a perfect sphere and you're deforming it one step at a time to eventually get to your shape, right? So if we want to go back to an example I've cited many times, can share that diagram real quick. And we could see that the basic energetic profile of the body is a deformed sphere, right? So if we imagine it kind of a balloon that we twist up 7 times. So basically the idea is that I could start with a sphere, twist around like a balloon animal a bunch of times, and eventually get the energetic profile of the body. So we have all these spheres which are more or less woven together through the spinal cord. So we can see, okay, well, I've got this photon waveform, and the reason my spine looks the way that it does in my skull is because it has to contain this waveform, because it's an incredibly powerful waveform, got a lot of light pressure in there, so the spine/skull sort of harnesses it and keeps it stable. But the basic idea is that everything can be built up from just starting with the sphere.
Yeah, but somebody has to bend those balloons in that shape.
Right, those are called the forces of nature.
Well, if it was first the force of nature, it would just be a simple balloon. It wouldn't shape a dog. It would just shape some deformity.
Right, so that's your presupposition, right? It's like you're not gonna be the one to tell me about this stuff. I'm telling you how it is. You start with a sphere, you deform it, and the number of times you have to deform it, that's how complex it is, okay? So the sun is really close to being a sphere, therefore it's not that complex. A human takes 7 folds of a sphere, and all you have is the basic structure. That's not the shape of a human body, is it? But we can see the shape of the human body starting to arise from that. So we're not even there yet. So obviously that tells us, yeah, the human body is super complicated, because if I look at a human body, the first thing I think of is not sphere. It's a lot more complicated than that, but it does have sphericity to it. And that's clear by things like shape of the brain, shape of the skull.
Yeah, but this is very complex.
It's really not.
Twisting. It really is. I mean, I'm kind of looking at it. It looks like some sort of DNA helix in there.
Well, things should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler, right? So this is not more complex than other theories. This is much simpler, because this is actually telling you what's going on. This is actually giving you information. Other theories aren't even giving you information. They're giving you things that are mostly like, could be classed as rhetoric that people repeat without really understanding. And the sad thing is that they think that that's logic. It's heartbreaking. People think that memorized talking points are logic. Like, please consider why you believe the things that you believe.
Well, I'm pretty sure because they've been on debates, and it's just they have to kind of repeat the same argument. I don't hold it up against that when they say things like that.
Things like what?
When they repeat their talking points, because that's their talking points.
Well, that's not the point of science, right? The point of science is not to repeat talking points. The point of science is to actually understand how things work, and that involves understanding models and axioms. Repeating talking points really has nothing to do with science whatsoever.
Oh yeah, but they bring out those talking points because it's based around their logic.
That's your implication. An implication you can't prove, and I'm asserting that's not a fact. Because if these people actually did go through their logic and check out their assumptions, make sure they're right, guess what? They conclude the exact same thing that I did. So the fact that people don't think the same thing as me is how I know that they haven't actually interrogated why they believe what they believe. Because really the answer is right there. Why are we here? Well, it's obviously the sun. What's our consciousness made out of? Same stuff the sun is putting here. Photons. That's the logical assumption.
Well, I mean, if this model was true, we would see living species on the moon and Mars.
Okay, I think you just need to let me do the rest of my presentation here, because what you're saying is not making a whole lot of sense to me right now. So the diagram that I originally posted up on my blog under helpful diagrams, the latest post that's up there, I really like that one. So please check that out if you can. I redid this diagram here. So originally had it looking a little bit different. So the one on the blog looks like this. And this is a good one because I screen grabbed the entire spheres inside a sphere. This is like a type packing model. It's like how many spheres can you fit inside a sphere? This is very key to understanding this concept, right? Because you start off with one sphere. So you got light totally internally refracted into a continuous surface, which is approximately a sphere. And then that light spins around, and eventually that energy causes it to split in two. And there's a conservation of the volume that the light is taking up. And since a sphere can only have since two spheres only have a packing density of 0.25, the resulting two spheres that are created in the splitting of the original one are going to be larger than the boundary of the original sphere. So I've got that in a diagram right down here. So what I decided to do is to like build it up in a step-by-step model. So what this is doing is deriving, aka predicting, a photostatic field, i.e. a field, i.e. a waveform, which remains the same not the same size, but its size varies within a very small boundary. So it has a variable size, but it has a minimum size and a maximum size. Minimum size is the boundary. So if we're talking about humans, the boundary is your body. And a maximum size of when it doubles, which is about twice the radius. So you can see that. And then the more spheres it splits up into, which is indicative of the energy, because it's going to split into more if there's more energy, because it takes energy to split it up. So to split it one time is going to be less energy than to split it two times, is going to be less than to split it three times. And then you could split it any number of times, and what that's going to do is cause the effective radius to shrink a little bit. So it also takes energy to eject that energy to a position farther than the boundary. And the farther it is away from the boundary, the more energy it takes to displace it. So that actually implies that since dividing it into four gives such a smaller radius, that the splitting into four pieces will actually be energetically preferred over splitting into two pieces, even though four pieces is technically one more split than into two pieces. And the reason for that is because the effective radius of it splitting in four is so much smaller than the effective radius of it splitting in two. And guess what? The heart has four chambers. And guess why? It's a fucking waveform. A fucking fucking sphere in a fucking bigger sphere. And that's a fucking prediction for you. So this other gibberish that other people are saying, memorize that is so dog shit propaganda rag, that ain't science, bruh. This is science. So if you want to push back on what I'm saying, you got to get a better model than this. But good luck with that. Because this is actually extremely simple, because all it really relies on is photon. So you got step by step working it all up. It's awesome. Going good.
So like photon as in particles, or photon as in...
There's no particles.
Okay, no particle photon. So
particles don't exist. Particles only approximately exist, because the only thing that exists is 3 + 1, right? So volume is the closest thing to existing, right? Volume is the closest thing to existing. But what's particle in the context of volume? A particle is a zero-dimensional entity. Those don't exist. What's the closest thing to a point particle existing? A center of mass. The existence of an effective center of mass, the fact that physics can use the concept of a center of mass, is the best evidence we have for the existence of point particles, and it most certainly does not demonstrate point particles. It just demonstrates that one point may be used to model the entire thing plus the relative torques. That doesn't speak to whether point particles actually exist, because calculus works and differentials don't exist either. So There's no evidence for particles. There's no valid evidence for particles existing. So you can't presuppose particles.
Well,
what generates the wave? The waveform, genius. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I was gonna say, well, I mean, kind of depends on what do you think about the Higgs boson?
I don't. So this is what I did, which is what I was actually going to talk about, which is what Doooovid wanted me to talk about before, is axiomatic regression. So Domingo, the bad faith lying sack of shit who's currently defaming me in the chat right now, wanted to talk to me about consciousness, and he's like, all we want to do right now is talk about consciousness. And so we start, and I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm all about the student-centered learning. So I started asking, what's your axioms for consciousness? And he's like, why can't we just use the accepted definition? I'm like, because there isn't one. We have to go through and figure out how it makes sense to parameterize this thing so that then you can then visualize it. And
So
then he basically had a complete mental breakdown at this point because I was doing axiomatic regression. So it's like I try to teach someone and they take it personally. So it's like, you're a piece of shit or a shill. Don't really care, but you've worn out any welcome you ever had with me.
So what are your thoughts on the particle accelerator?
My thoughts are I would like to finish my explanation without being interrupted.
Sorry, I thought you were done.
In order to, I haven't even started actually. So what I was trying to do with Domingo, whose brain is fried due to being a waste of life, who wastes away in his parents' basement and knows nothing except how to make insults on the internet and derail conversations with Stasi tier tactics. What he failed to understand is that axiomatic regression is integral to thinking properly. So how does that work exactly? We break things down according to what you take a concept. It's like you want to know what a concept is, right? Because it seems like you kind of know what it is. Something like time, axiom, words that we kind of use, but maybe we don't know exactly what they mean. So I decided to do it for language. So you start off at the bottom, right? So language is at the bottom. Hopefully that this is visible on the screen. Yep, looks like it. Awesome. So we've got language at the bottom, and you break it down into two things: what it is and what it does. So what is language? And then you have to build back up the tree to all the words that are defined in the what it is and the what it does, right? So I've built this one up. So what is language? Meaningful arrays. What is it? And what does it do? So form and function. So we break it down, all the things that you have to presuppose. So meaningful arrays and communication. Okay, so what's communication? Well, it's conveying data. Well, what's data? It's a written symbol. Well, what's a symbol? So you can always trace it back all the way up to what we absolutely need to axiomatize in order for this stuff to make sense in the first place. So it allows you to see what is more fundamental as a presupposition within your definitions of words. So you start, it's pretty big if you look at it all at once, but basically what I've managed to do is make the entire thing self-referential. So for something to be self-referential, we have two conditions. One is that the form and that what it is and what it does are essentially the same. They are also self-referential, so we've converged into a sameness between what it is and what it does. So something like symbol, what it is a meaningful form. And what it does is form meaning.
Well, the thing, I have a problem with that.
Could you just let me get through this, please?
Okay.
So then we just keep regressing over and over until we get to something that is, again, self-referential. So sameness is the attribution of equivalence. That's a mathematical concept. So we have mathematical concepts that we don't define in the diagram, but now everything we want to say about language can now be said in the language of mathematics, which is kind of the point, right? Because we're trying to hone in on these things that seem self-evident, but maybe aren't, because we don't always know if we're referring to the same concept when we're speaking. So this is your basic, and you get all the way up to here to the attribution of equivalence and the the human choice. So we stop axiomatizing after that because human choice would then be self-referential to language. So we want to sort of bring it to a point where it's not exploding into another tree, but we can basically understand on some level what a human choice is. So that's one of the ones that I did. And it's very important because we want to know why we don't understand each other sometimes, and this helps.
Well, you say self-referential, but it feels like circular thinking to me.
Yeah, that's what self-referential is. That's the point. Everything is self-referential within its axioms. Are you back, Doovid?
Yeah, I had my food. I just kind of like quite tired. I'm having a hard time like dozing off a little bit. But yeah, it was nice diagrams.
Thanks. So yeah, did you want to wrap it up, Doovid?
Yeah, I don't know why I'm so exhausted, but if you want to just do a short show this week, that's fine. I'm not sure if like memes or anyone, if you want to carry on, that's fine. If memes or something, or even Bubble want to keep on talking, that's fine also.
Well, I'm not really interested in this debate that's going on right now because, I mean, really, it's not going anywhere.
Well, I have questions. It's just
you're not asking questions. You're asserting a counter thesis for which you can't substantiate with any evidence. And the fact is that I'm sorry I'm being cranky here, but this happens to me all the time. And at some point, it's like I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to have to explain why your kook theory is wrong. I just want to talk about why my good theory is right, because it is.
I think what she's saying is let Jennifer finish her thoughts and save questions for the end.
Well, that's what I've been trying to do. But this thing, like, we've been hopping too much, and I haven't really gotten any chance to ask questions.
You've also never been in this exact environment before. This is a novel situation. How do I respond? These people are being nice now. Oh, Jen's getting a little bit cranky. What's going on here?
No, I try to let Jen finish, but she's kind of jumping from topic to topic. I really get no chance to ask questions. Yeah, a lot to take in. So I want to say one topic, ask questions on that topic, because I kind of all over the place now.
This is where note taking comes in, because I found, like, being on the show very often, I'm like typing in like another tab or something, like, all right, couple of points that I need to remember, because Doovid will ramble for like 5 to 7 minutes. I'll be like, all right, I want to talk about at least 3 of these things. I'm totally not going to remember them.
Yeah. So I want to keep to like one topic, ask questions on that topic.
I think Jen had a particular presentation, kind of having been within education a little bit, that she wanted to present it, and then questions at the end.
Oh, okay, so we can go back to like the presentation page 1.
I'm still trying to figure out that periodic table, because that looks eerily like something I was watching. Dude, is that an archetype of a form? Just because if that's going to limit...
Well, that's a very good question, right? Like, I would argue that it's a form. And whether, I think that the archetype that it falls under is geometry. Does that make sense?
I'm just trying to think, like, if that in and of itself is going to predict, it's like, all right, you're not going to get past like element 118. It's like that's a very bold, and when you look at it like that, that's why I'm trying to figure out what the hell it actually means. I'm looking at that, I'm like,
dude, that's what every fucking sage has been doing since the beginning of civilization, man. I feel you. Like, as frustrated as you no doubt are, I can feel you, dude. Right there with you. I mean, I still don't know exactly what this means. I just know that it appears to be a fact, just based on, analysis, God forbid.
Because I keep on looking at these things. I keep on listening to more and more stuff from like the Institute, from advanced study and stuff. And it's like, do I necessarily know what they're saying? No. But I'm looking at these different things, these different parameters. I'm like, all right, I'm visualizing in my head, seeing how this works. Does this kind of make sense? Okay, is this an exact thing? Is this a rough estimate? Are we just kind of like slowly cutting around the edges to figure it out? But I keep on going back, and I was listening to something that another physicist had did. and he was going over like the analysis, breaking down like the hyperbolic figure eight knot, its complement, and everything. And during that lecture, he started off with, it's like, all right, well, what's the point? You get a line, and then he got really happy. He's like, now we have a circle. And I'm like, oh, I like circles. Jen's a fan of circles, and then he goes up to the sphere and everything. He's like, well, what's a hyperbolic figure eight knot? It's another form of a circle, just in another form there. It's like you're putting in hyperbolic space. It kind of goes like this. I'm like, this is very interesting. And
well, think about the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Can you see how that lends itself to a figure eight? Because the position and momentum kind of feed into each other like an Ouroboros type thing?
I mean, that's essentially what it's doing. It's like, I mean, this is basically just a circle. I mean, that's just 2 dimensions there. And then if you're going up, I forget how many dimensions you said it was. Was it 3 + 1?
It's 3 + 1 per order, right? So you got to think of it in terms of a Fourier transform, right? Like what makes things independent is whether they have the same frequency, not whether they're in the same direction. So we have this notional orthogonality that we can relate to on the Cartesian plane, but that's not real. What's real is the frequencies thing, and we use the Cartesian plane to get an easier grip on what frequencies are, and the fact that we can, coordinate transform via the Fourier transform is sort of what I'm using. But yeah, basically it's 3 + 1 per order of magnitude, because the argument is basically like if something is happening at 1/1000th of volume, even if it's in the same physical location, it's approximately independent. Again, that's an axiom, right? Somebody could disagree with that, but it's like, I feel it's a reasonable assumption. Did that make any sense at all?
No. Because I'm like, all right, because what has been claimed about that particular hyperbolic form is it's basically the smallest stable form there. And the fact that something with its knot thing, it's like 5/2 as far as like some like knot comparison. And apparently within like vortices and everything, that research, like, was it 5/3 seems to be a fundamental property of like turbulence and everything. And this is going to sound very silly, but I was grabbing my laundry earlier from the laundromat, and they had one of those little metal carts, and it had like the little pole up there. And as I was bringing it around, I gave it a little bit of spin, and as it went, kept on moving, and then it kept rotating around that axis. But as soon as I stopped moving it forward, it kind of stopped rotating a little bit. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, that's absolutely probably nothing. But I'm thinking, I'm like, all right, if I'm a photon traversing across this universe of stuff and things, depending on what the smallest fundamental manifold of this world is, if I have any type of rotation or spin, or basically just the sheer fact that you have electromagnetism kind of traveling throughout the universe, if you have that spin, how would it traverse along these manifolds? Like, what would be the fastest way? Does something happen to these manifolds as you have that electromagnetism transfer over that? And this has got me thinking, I'm like, I think there's big things coming if we manage not to destroy ourselves.
It's the electromagnetism causing the motion, which is the counterintuitive part. We think time causes motion. No, electromagnetism causes motion.
So light came first.
Yeah, that's why it's so counterintuitive. Because it's like, we was light. Everything is just light. Well, that's not any kind of answer, but it's like, yeah.
And you just made so many theists happy. You made so many theists happy just because it's like, all right, it went click. Boom, there you go. Science proves God.
Well, I mean,
all that's my friends in the atheist community.
I don't really think that you can prove God. I think you have to axiomatize God.
I think it's a matter of faith.
Don't you think it's a personal decision? Because like some people, they just want to be atheists, for lack of a better term. They have their reasons. But it's an emotional decision to believe in God.
Jen, is this your diagram?
No, it's just a meme.
No, because I'm looking at the platonic forms. I'm like, that's basically how Thad Robert started his video.
I didn't make the platonic forms thing. I made this meme.
Okay.
I just took the big brain Wojak and dressed him up like Emperor Trajan. And then I put a comparison to the Cartesian plane. Because, Cartesian plane is great. I'm not poo-pooing the Cartesian plane because it gave us calculus. Calculus is freaking awesome, right? So don't misunderstand me here. I'm not trying to shit on calculus. Like, calculus is great. I wouldn't be able to have done what I did without calculus, but it's fundamentally not what represents reality. So maybe this form you're talking about, memes, is closer to the base form of reality. Because even though the quantum periodic table is in some sense a base form of space-time, that doesn't mean that there can't be other forms that also dictate the unveiling of matter, or however you want to word it, the progression or evolution of matter.
Right. Let me add a little bit more context to kind of what makes me think there's more credence to this. And I was watching one of three blue, one brown's videos. One of the math professors has been doing these different things, and apparently he's like, all right, well, how do you measure this sphere basically in a Cartesian plane? It's like, all right, well, you put a circle that's going to touch the outside radius on both the top, and you connect it. So you have a cylinder. Because now if you have a cylinder, if you fold the outside of that cylinder over onto that sphere, it's going to perfectly cover the sphere. So basically you're taking a circle and just having it go through different transformational states. And I'm like, all right, well, if that makes sense, then that would make sense that you'd have some form of a circle being twisted into minimal manifolds, because, I mean, just if it's going to do the easiest thing possible, if this happens to be that particular structure, I don't know. I think it. I need to learn more.
Well, you're talking about the figure eight, right? Like the MC Escher figure eight thing. Okay, so here's what I want you to do. Look at what's on the screen right now, and imagine a figure eight tracing its way through this. It kind of looks like a figure eight, doesn't it?
I mean, if
you take that shape and you shove it into a sphere, do you know what I mean? Tight packing inside a sphere, it's not going to look quite like that, is it? It's going to look more like your shape that you're talking about, your figure eight.
One of the things that kind of got me to this, when you're like, there ain't no such thing as quarks, and I was taken aback. I'm like, wait, what, Nani? It's like, well, we've observed these particles after smashing some protons together really, really quickly. It's like, we've observed these things, but every time we have tried to apply different pressures or forces, we just end up having 3 new quarks appear. I'm like, wait. 3 new quarks means basically you got at least a proton there. I'm like, could it be that, I don't know, that spherical shape that's being affected by all the forces of the universe, at least based upon our observational equipment and everything, it kind of might look like there's 3 things, but maybe it's just a circle and whatever.
It was an illusion, Michael.
I don't know. Maybe a wizard did it.
Well, that's the thing. Cool. Like that's what the sages mean when they say Maya. It's like, yeah, the universe. There's a veiling quality to the universe, and I think that is because order and disorder, aka entropy, sort of are woven together on the causal level, and that things don't really work without this pump. And so there's like entropy order, and we're like looking at this, 20 million layered entropy order sandwich, and we're like, what's going on there? Right?
I think we're just kind of nibbling at the crust a little bit.
We're just like, I cannot digest that. So like doing this, this type of physics requires us to not suspend our senses entirely, but we have to take into account this notion that what appears to be true is not always what's true. What appears to be true, it means something, right? The fact that it's been interpreted as quarks, that means something. But what it means is on the side of the human, not on the side of the universe. It means that we've imposed this structure to understand it. We said, well, because of that, there's this 3ness to it. It must have 3 separate components. But well, is that real?
Well, it's just a sophisticated guess. Everything, all science is just a sophisticated guess.
We're doing best on like the knowledge that we have at the time there, and again, yes. It comes to do you have a better model? You have a better model that happens to extend exactly. Do you have a better guess? Because that's the thing. It's like, to know perfect truth. It's like, oh no, that kind of sounds like you're asking for omniscience there. That seems kind of like a tall order, unless you're the Almighty. But
Well, that's why the only acceptable means of transmission of information are revelation and remembrance, because there is no other way to know things. Everything else is just seeming like it's knowing something, which I'm sure is quite something most people do not really aren't comfortable with.
I don't get that. Can you repeat it?
Well, the only two acceptable means of transmission of knowledge are revelation and remembrance.
Remembrance? No.
So you cannot reach revelation or remembrance through logic.
A lot of it's mimetic.
But you can use it through experimentation using logic.
Well, think of it like a meme, right? Like where do memes come from?
Sure, it's not logic, but you can use your logic through experimentation.
Well, think about it. Where do memes come from?
Memes are just repeating products of our environment, because if we live in an
that
island,
is tautological, though, right?
Well, we all live in the same earth with repeating environments. It's only natural we come up with the same solutions. Like all cultures came up with a spoon. It's only logical because we have a mouth, fingers. Clearly, we're not going to use a big old pitchfork.
So you're saying stuff exists because it exists?
No, I'm saying because of the law of supply and demand. The law of supply and the law of supply and demand demands us to be logical or die. It's a very important law.
It's not a law.
It's a law for economics.
Most people aren't logical, though.
No, people don't want to admit
it's not logical
the
for you
laws
to come
of
in here and
economics.
do anything other than try to learn from me, but you're doing it. So you're not logical either.
No, I'm here to take in your knowledge, what you know, and then compare it to other knowledge that I've heard, and kind of try to integrate it, and in my head debate them. Like, does that make sense? Yes or no? What could be possible?
Just trying to figure stuff out. No. Yeah, it sounds like no. Markets are a useful tool for different things. I mean, you got to be wary of them.
Yeah, but there's economics steps into our reality. Economics, you can't separate economics.
Yeah, well, then again, you can also go back and just argue memetics, kind of like the great toilet paper shortage of 2020. What the heck caused that? I don't know. The two ladies that were fighting in Walmart over package. Oh my God, all the toilet paper is going missing, even though this was a very bad new flu and not dysentery.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a small factor.
The level of bowel movements, I don't know if
it's a lot of factors. Yeah.
But I actually kind of liked what Jen was doing with that listing of, it's like, all right, how do we determine what this is? And I'm like, oh, looks like she basically just did most of modern mimetic theory for me. I appreciate it.
Well, again, just coming back to what we were saying before, imagine trying to fit this form into a sphere. You have to deform this to fit it into a sphere, right? Like, you can fit it into a sphere without deforming it. Do you agree?
What do we?
A bigger sphere, goddammit.
Oh yeah, a bigger sphere of this,
it's not a trick fucking question.
No, I wasn't sure if you were talking about this or your other presentation.
No, I'm talking about what's on the screen right now. So this shape here, we could easily draw a sphere around it, correct? Yeah. But we could draw a smaller sphere if we deformed it. There you go. Now, why would we want a smaller sphere?
It's entropy.
Exactly. He's realized he could just answer everything with entropy and be technically right.
No,
minimum energy.
How do you get from there to entropy? I don't follow. Sorry.
It takes more energy to make a bigger sphere.
The universe tends in basically the least energy. Basically, whatever is easier.
Universe is a cheap motherfucker, right? Memes.
I like the universe.
Demand.
It's not bad to be cheap, but the universe is notoriously energetic cheap.
He could use a market analogy. Basically, the market's going to determine exactly what's the
efficiency is the analog here. Markets are efficient. That remains to be seen, but in physics, it's actually true that there is efficiency, right? So we think about, first of all, we think about what could be possible. So we could inscribe this thing into a sphere, but it would be a very large sphere. We could inscribe it into an even smaller sphere if it were deformed. And just as Meme said, you have to compress the edges. But what's going to happen if you compress those edges too much? They're going to start pushing back against each other because of the Pauli exclusion principle, right? So you can't crush it into itself to smush it into nothing, but you can deform it a little bit, and that's where you regain your Mobius strip shape. So the Mobius strip shape is basically an approximation, because that shape is immanent. It exists everywhere equally. Okay, the energies aren't pervaded equally. Why? Because the universe prefers lower energies, so we have more helium, yada, 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 but it is immanent. There is no separation in time, but this figure 8 Mobius strip tracing through it is a temporal approximation to its action potential. Does that make sense?
Say that one more time, because I think I kind of followed you to Mobius strip, because I'm like, all right, electromagnetism kind of.
You got this really complicated shape, okay?
Okay.
And it's immanent. So what does immanent mean? It means it occurs all at the same time. So you're bashed in the face with 118 microstates. How do we slow down something that's infinitely fast?
You use a modeler like Thunderfoot did, basically, when he was observing what was it, supercritical gas, because this is another thing
that kind of model, right?
What he did is you looked at how these different things, they kept separating into spheres, and then they all kind of congealed together. And the way it kind of congealed together, I'm looking at it, I'm like, I'm reading into this. I know I'm reading into this, but that looks kind of familiar.
What do you mean, like traveling? Like
coming to the next step, imagine now your Mobius strip. The Mobius strip, if you're moving on the surface of that Mobius strip ultra fast, right? Moving on the Mobius strip ultra fast, you are simulating that shape in a non-immanent way.
What she's describing is like Sonic the Hedgehog from like Sonic 3.
Assume
like he's just looping around, kind of like something that keeps spinning around itself but is connected.
Yeah, but
so you see how your little form, your figure 8 Mobius strip, is a model for this shape. Notice how it's much simpler? How much simpler is the Mobius strip than this fucker?
I mean, it would probably explain a lot.
But they're both true, right? They're both true. It's just that one is simpler than the other. One is a projection of the other. So the Mobius strip is a projection of the effective velocity, quote unquote, big quotes, right? Because velocity is not defined at this scale, because you need to have an actual tangible distance to define velocity, but it's the analog to velocity.
Did you say it was actually... Is this possible to derive through a Fourier transformation?
Well, it could just be our perception as well. Like you could just say we're perceiving it to be straight, even though it's just twisting, like in that Mobius strip.
Now the idea is that we're acknowledging that it's too complex to understand all at once, and so we're modeling it in a shape that is maximally similar to its immanence, and a single thing traveling super fast on the surface of a Mobius strip traces out this shape, or approximately this shape, right?
Okay,
that's what it is. It's an approximation, right?
Sure.
Beams,
let me look on. No. I'm just I don't want to strip, because I'm just thinking of a donut.
Well, this isn't the donut.
It's a bit of an optical illusion.
Donut.
No, it's
to get the donut. You need a bound system for the donut.
Gotcha. No. I see what you're saying. Oh, that makes sense.
So like it kind of twists, and the like opposite ends now meet up, kind of thing. It's strange.
It's like one of the old printer cables. You tug it in, and then you just kind of give it a twist.
Yeah, like that.
That would kind of roughly, yeah. Especially if you put it into a circle or a sphere.
Well, it's a good model because things don't displace instantaneously. C is the maximum displacement, quote unquote, velocity, right? So C will predict the speed at which these microstates are felt.
I mean, that would be Planck time, I would assume.
It would be very short, but it wouldn't be Planck time. because think of it like Brownian motion. It would be on the order of Brownian motion.
Okay.
Because I mean, I can say that because we know that Brownian motion is a thing, right? Like, are you familiar with that? Where you put
that was
crystal into hot water and it slowly dissolves? Have you seen those demonstrations of Brownian motion?
No, I have not.
You're talking about the ones where like the particles and basically they chill everything to like extremely cold temperatures, and then they have like the magnet goes around.
No.
And okay.
They just put a single crystal of it, like a dyed crystal, into hot water, and it automatically dissolves. And the
you see how it diffuses.
The shape of the diffusion is called Brownian motion. Yeah. So,
no. Dr. Wolfram talked about that. They did that with pollen grains in water, because the water molecules would knock the grain of pollen around.
So it's not on the Planck scale that these microstates are being filled. It's on our scale. It could be on the Planck scale, right? Theoretically, could be on the Planck scale if it was a really simple system.
I don't have the orders of magnitude in my head. Planck scale is probably, because we're talking basically just on like the atomic level. For
a very simple system with only a couple of atoms, then the light waveform would spread out to the maximum entropy state quickly. But for systems that are comprised of many atoms, that won't be the case. And we know that because we can observe Brownian motion, which occurs on our time scale. So like it occurs on the order of 1 second. So even though on the order of 1 second means like anywhere from 1 second to, let's see here, I'll share it, 1 to 10 seconds. So you can see here what Brownian motion looks like. So all he's done is put a bit of dye into a cup and it's expanding. But it's not done expanding, right? Like this expansion process will continue for some time. But the whole point is that this process is ultimately because of a shape that looks like this Mobius strip being a natural part of the universe, because it's inherently vibrational. You can get this motion that just goes on and on and on without actually inputting anything into the system.
So you're saying the universe is infinite, or a feedback loop?
I think with the universe being infinite, it's like computationally infinite. You could say it's de facto infinite.
Kind of like a simulation infinite? Like
Matrix? It's like, no. Like on an ant, for an ant, as far as an ant's concerned, the Earth is infinite because it's never going to get to the other end. Right? For the same reason why for an ant, the Earth is infinite. Help the ants. You could take you could just I'm sure there's people out there who just for the sake of disproving me would take ants on a around the world tour, be like, okay, we're in France now.
No. Biologists probably have done stuff like that. No, I understand your example. So what you're saying is, if we're the ants, we need some help.
So what I'm saying is that if the universe is finite, it's so big that for us it's de facto infinite.
To our knowledge, it's continuing to expand. So essentially, for our standard purposes, it's infinite.
We're too small for it to be to make any difference, right? Like,
I mean, are you saying
we can't find the boundary of the universe?
So it's just really big. But that's different than, because apparently infinites have different sizes to infinites, but you're not saying it's like a big infinite or a small infinite. It's just really big.
It seems to, and again, a lot of these things seem to be getting revised actually in the past couple of months. So we'll have some more data hopefully. But the universe seems to be expanding. Who could have seen
this coming?
Oh, I know. It's almost like, to our observation, it's almost like we're spinning around. What is this thing that seems to be adding some angular momentum? And what you actually just said about the Cartesian plane probably is the reason why I may have slightly confused Dr. Wolfram the other day. I asked him, like, and again, I made an assumption here, and I didn't know if it was true. I'm like, why does it seem that most objects in the universe spin the same way? And he started to get a little confused, and then he was like, well, it all depends on your level of what is up. And that was the answer he gave. And to be fair, it's like, this kind of confused me too. I'm still kind of confused about it. And then he just kind of moved on.
he's really pushing the boundaries of understanding. And I gotta say, like, I respect the guy for doing it on a live stream. Because it ain't easy going to the bottom of the universe. Put it that way. But I mean, he's I don't want to say he's on the right track necessarily, but he does have some good ideas about like analogs, right? Because he's like, what's the analog for this mathematical process in reality? So at least he's trying to tie it back to physics.
Well, I think Doooovid kind of hit the nail on the head earlier when he's like, he's developing a modeling tool for it. I mean, whether or not he actually finds what is a major breakthrough or answer, it's like, oh, he's giving us tools to actually help visualize and conceptualize these things. And a lot of times where here's all these equations, it either makes sense to you or it doesn't.
Yeah. Gee, what happened to Doooovid? Hope he's okay.
I think he looks tired. He looks like he's getting ready to Doooovid crash.
Yeah, I'm about to get off, but yeah, I'm just gathering my thoughts. But yeah, good conversation. Keep it going if you want.
Yeah, so what do you guys think? Is there something we want to talk about? Something else that we want to go into? Or if there's anyone in the chat who wants to join the show and share their thoughts, I can put the link in the chat again. Or we can just wrap it up. It's up to you guys. I know these conversations can be somewhat challenging.
What you just presented, that's on your blog, Jen?
I haven't written anything about a Mobius strip on my blog because I don't want to put anything that's going to confuse people. And I know the math that's already up there is confusing people, and I feel like a Mobius strip is going to be just sort of going in the wrong direction with regards to not confusing people. But I'm down to talk about it, because it is important, and maybe through talking about it, we can figure out an easier way to present it so that I can incorporate it in a way that I feel won't confuse people, because I really do want to make it like semi-accessible to people who are unfamiliar with these concepts. And you have to visualize. So visualizing a Mobius strip is pretty tricky.
Well, it's trying to get to. It's not only that. It's trying to visualize in your context. Like it's like not just the animation of this little universe, like helixical universe, well, figured infinity symbol universe, but like, yeah, kind of maybe make an animation of that.
She actually has one about how potentially life came to be. She played it like a week or two ago. Pretty good.
Oh, but I have to look. I have to see it.
Well, this is the thing. It's like Jennifer's putting her stuff out there. She has her stuff out there, and it's like, all right, the reason why you put your stuff out there is so you don't have to explain it every single time, even though you're always going to, at some point or another, when you run across somebody and you're having that discussion, have to explain it pretty much every single time. You just try to save as much work for yourself as you can, and that's why it can be very annoying. But I do love how a lot of the stuff is just kind of going, and all of a sudden it's like, well, our math, maybe we weren't quite right. Maybe these things that were in unpublished works, because it wasn't the data we were looking for, maybe there's actually something there. So I have great hopes, but I'm actually going to have to call it quits for right now as well, Jen. Nice to meet you.
See you around.
Bubble?
Yeah, Bubble.
Peace out, Doooovid. Jennifer, thank you as always.
Thanks for joining. We'll see you on another stream.
All right.
So yeah, I can show you how the DNA works with the light thing, if you want. So.
Okay, sure. Can you give me like a quick rundown? Because if you're gonna, are you saying like you're saying DNA is light? I'm not sure. What is your take?
Well, light is something that exists and it can become bounded to a system, and when it does, it takes on the shape of the system. And from our talk before, we know that systems tend to be in a spherical array. So what you have here is a model of two light waveforms. So they're the big orange balls here.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll be bound to a system. And the question is, how do we get DNA? So we think of it as the different constituents of DNA. There's only 4 ingredients of DNA. They're called base pairs, and they can more or less line up to the halfway point without undergoing self-repulsion. So matter will tend to organize itself in a self-repelling way. It won't tend to cluster when there's a potential around it. It'll tend to spread out along the potential in what are called equipotential lines. Could you just mute yourself? Because there's a whole bunch of noise going on in the background for you right now for some reason. We have... So basically, you could think of it like with the magnets. When you have a magnetic field, a magnet generates magnetic field, then you put some little filings around it. You'll have these equipotential surfaces, so you'll have little bits spread out along the boundary.
So what would be the magnet biological potential in your theory?
Photon waveform, spherical light bubble.
So it's I mean, because I'm guessing your lights or elements, and the elements make up the DNA, right?
Well, they're called base pairs. So the base pair is a compound, and compounds are made up of elements. But the base pairs themselves can line up along the surface of the light waveform until the middle, because they're not going to naturally move back here because they tend to self-repel. So they can line up for about half of the waveform spontaneously, but they won't start to curl back spontaneously, because that would be putting matter closer to the beginning point, which is not what the matter wants to do. The matter wants to spread away from itself. So you have these two light waveforms, and they're half full with these base pairs, and you line them up to the minimum energy state or the maximum entropy state, which is the state of maximum repulsion. So you have one line of elements. So you got to imagine that these are basically submerged in a bath of things that look just like this, but this is just a subset of the totality of it.
So you have it's a light waveform. Oh, so a light waveform submerged in aqueous.
Yeah.
Am I keeping up so far?
Aqueous, yeah.
Okay,
aqueous bounded system. It has to be a bounded system, because otherwise you can't get these light waveforms.
I mean,
you can only get waveforms like this in a bounded system.
Shouldn't this
otherwise the light will just keep expanding forever.
Okay.
Well, so you start it out like this. You have to put it in the minimum energy state, which is where the alternate sides are. The two lines of molecules of base pairs are on opposite sides. So you line them up on opposite sides like this. And you just start to spin the light waveform. And you keep spinning it, and then you get the DNA shape.
Okay, but how does
this is spontaneous self-generation of DNA using a light form. And as you can see, this can keep going forever.
Yeah, but I'm wondering when does...
You don't need an intelligent creator, because this is your complexity right here, spinning light fields.
Well, that's the thing. Like, how does I got so many questions. How does first DNA set even arrive? And if it's
you just need a situation. You need a situation where it's contained enough, and these base pairs are basically lying around, and they're made up of elements. So you need all the elements to exist in a bath where these photostatic waveforms can arise. And once the photostatic waveforms arise, they'll start zipping together chains of DNA spontaneously.
So then that means this is replicatable in an experiment. You can build.
Well, I don't need to replicate it in an experiment, because I already know what DNA looks like. I already know that that's the shape of DNA. Well, I mean, what experiment do I need to do?
Well, that's the thing. If you're saying this is replicatable, the thing is, if you do replicate this, you prove you can create life. You become an alchemist. You become a god.
Well, I'd need to be able to create the static light field, which is unclear that it's possible to do that in an easy way. But I can show hypothetically how the light field weaves the DNA. It's a model.
So it's only a question of how to build that the wavelength, that light wave. I'm not sure what you say it is.
It's a light waveform.
Okay, light waveform. So you only have to figure out how to do that, and then the rest
I've already done that.
Well, if you can do the light waveform, okay, if it's easy, then you should be able to take that to a lab and replicate life.
Well, not necessarily, because I'd need the ingredients to build the refractor, and
Well, I
they don't
mean,
necessarily exist outside of life.
Wait, what do you
Again,
mean?
this is you know, so the way that the light field becomes binded is through total internal refraction. So you have a light coming in,
So
and it
the
goes
light.
into a box with a hole in it, and it doesn't ever leave the hole because it just keeps bouncing inside the box.
Well, I don't know, because this is like you ever seen like it's like saying you can have a ball and inside it's made of glass, and if you shoot like a light inside and just close the lid, you're gonna have like infinite light inside that ball. That doesn't happen because light does not travel. There's no such thing as little lights.
That sounds like you trying to tell me something rather than you trying to learn from me.
Well, okay. Well, I'm saying my criticism from my understanding of light.
Which is non-existent, right? Some
Well,
YouTube video.
No, well, yeah, you could say that, but those YouTube videos based on, I have to get this information somehow. Whether it's from YouTube or a book or a teacher, it doesn't really matter.
Models are simplifications of reality. So even if this is not literally how light works,
but this is why I have trouble with your model. It's like saying we could take a spherical ball and the inside is made out of glass, and if we shoot light in there with a flashlight, it doesn't matter. You close up the lid, it's always going to be light inside there. And we observe it doesn't happen.
That's not what I'm saying, though, because life has to keep taking in energy to sustain itself.
So there's a constant light source?
Yeah, it's called the sun.
Yeah.
You aware of that?
Yeah, but we also have nighttime, and we have like
that doesn't actually change anything.
I mean, I feel like it would die as soon as it got dark.
If you didn't eat food, you would die.
But right? I feel like your organism would just die overnight if it needs light. But
it gets the light slowly through eating?
Yeah, but at first it has to get to that point where it has a mouth and it's able to digest. Right. And plus, those other organisms
complexity of its light field.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, but as soon as the light goes out, it's gonna die.
It doesn't go out because you keep eating.
Well, that's the thing. Those other things you're eating also require light.
I know, it's a big circle of life.
Yeah, but like you said, it requires the light to be in the first place.
And we have the sun for that. So there's no way to shoehorn God into this.
No, but I'm saying as soon as the sunset hits, the light goes away, and now you're.
But that's not how it works, because digestion slows the process of uptaking the photons for the second time. Like when you eat a hamburger, it doesn't immediately combust into flames and pure energy, does it? You digest it slowly over a period of days.
No, yeah, but that's assuming you can get like a steady supply of other organisms to eat. That's not.
That's pretty much a safe assumption, given that none of us looks like a gaunt skeleton. I think it's pretty safe to assume we're all fed.
Well, no, the prey's kind of try to run away. It wants to live. It wants to escape being eaten.
I guess.
The probability of it, this being successful, is extremely low that it becomes impossible.
But it's not impossible, because I just showed you how DNA can come out of two simple life forms.
Oh, sorry, it cut off. Sorry, can you repeat that again?
I just showed you how DNA can come out of the oscillation of two light forms.
Well,
that is a complex system being built out of a simple system. Once again, another anecdote.
But the thing, if this is true, it should be replicatable in a lab. All you do is have to replicate this in a lab, and you'll get billions. You'll get the world.
That is neither here nor there. Okay,
well,
it's just it's completely really irrelevant. It's a model. You don't need to test it because it predicts stuff that's already been determined to exist.
Well, if it's a model, we have to test it. We test on models.
You don't need to test a model when it predicts something that's already been determined to exist.
But you're stating a ground.
DNA has been determined to exist.
Yes, but you're
I don't
determining.
need to now go out and prove that DNA follows that shape. I already know what shape the DNA follows.
Yeah, it's not about the shape. You're saying this is how DNA is starting. So you're giving the building blocks to life. This is like groundbreaking. That would be a groundbreaking experiment.
You know what the sad part is that most people are so stuck with their heads up their own asses that they can't even realize how significant this is. So I'm glad
but you have
at
to
least
prove
you realize it. I have proven it. That's what proof is.
Well, that's the thing. Show us you can do this in the lab, and then nobody.
I don't take orders from you, though. I don't take orders from you. I have given a model. It makes the predictions. My job is done here. Now, if I choose to go farther with that, that's my choice. But I've met the standard of proof here. I've given a model that makes the prediction. Nobody else has that. Nobody else can predict DNA. That's the end of it.
Yes, but if you carry out this model, prove it to the world, you'll get billions, and heck, you can give it to charity. You don't have to keep
damn
money.
it! Get off the topic, please. Okay, listen. People listening to this fucking show, never fucking ask me if I'm going to publish or about getting money or a Nobel Prize. Okay, I don't want to hear it. What I do with what I know is my choice. I don't care about what you think I should do with this knowledge. Okay, I really don't want to hear it. I'm assuming this is Domingo here. I'll have to kick him out in 2 seconds because he has no self-control.
Yes, you have to understand that Jen is never going to prove anything to you.
Well, just give us the means to prove it then.
I just proved it. I just fucking showed you how the two light waveforms make the DNA. That's what proof is. That's what proof is. You're just like, I don't know what proof is, so I'm just going to keep doubling down and asking for proof. It's like, you don't get to shift the goalposts.
What's the thing? I see an extreme flaw in your model. This whole capturing light doesn't work. I see there seems a major flaw in your model.
That you can prove that life forms have light in them.
Yes,
the vibration, the electromagnetic waveform.
You can also say all life is a vibration. And you can say we can capture a vibration and then wrap DNA around that.
Jen, why are you so angry?
It's because I think I'm pushing something. I'm pushing something here.
I've heard the same arguments about 1,000 times.
Well,
I'm not being listened to. And I'm tired of being given unsolicited advice by people whose authority I don't accept. And all I ask is just don't give me unsolicited advice. That is not a low enough. People can't even rise to the absolute lowest standard. That's why I'm a little bit upset.
We're not trying to...
Bad faith. You're a bad faith debater, Domingo. You're wasting your intelligence.
You're not a little bit upset. You're very upset. And you're always hostile to your guests that don't submit to your claims of superior knowledge without having it been proven.
You are the same, except that I have knowledge and you don't. So you're the one who's making the unreasonable assertion of authority, not me. And you're jealous that I have real authority and you don't. You just have your little quips and one-liners and snark videos.
But I'm not angry.
No, Jen, you got to calm down.
I think you're extremely angry.
Jen,
none of us are angry. Jen,
Bubble just told you that you need to calm down.
Oh, okay. Yeah, more unsolicited advice, which you know is going to antagonize me. So I just wonder why there's so little self-restraint.
But that's you.
Jen, can you conserve your energy?
I could do as I please. And getting unsolicited advice from plebs is going to lead to me being displeased. That's a predictable response that I have. If you want to try to antagonize me, that says more about you than me.
Do you want people to learn your knowledge, or do you just want people to submit to it?
Well, how many articles are on my blog?
Can you please answer the question?
Can you answer the question?
I think you want people to submit to it.
Jen, you have to let some things go. Look, you might be right about some things. Doesn't mean...
So why do you keep doubling down with unsolicited
Because I've been there, Jen. This is what... Look,
Bubbles trying to help you, Jen.
Oh, I think you guys just both want to feel superior to me.
No, I don't think. No. I don't think you're a smart person, Jen. but you're not going to be right
Sure.
about 100% things of the thing, and we have to
You can't
criticize our
prove that
own thoughts.
assertion. You don't have to criticize anything. You're under mind control to think that criticism is a good way to be going towards knowledge. It isn't, and the proof is that neither of you has any knowledge you can point to. You just have criticisms. So
Sure,
did
we can
T-Jump. T-Jump made some pretty dumb assertions. He said there was no essential difference between life and non-life because he was so dead set on criticizing me. He couldn't just accept that I was right. So he ended up making a damn fool of himself.
Even T-Jump can be wrong, but you have to accept that you could also be wrong. We're all wrong.
You're wrong. Domingo's wrong.
And you could be wrong about this.
But because of your inferiority complex, you want to drag me down to your level. It's called tall poppy syndrome.
I'm trying to get you to question yourself.
For being superior. I have. No. And the fact that you're implying that I haven't is extremely insulting.
No,
you're saying
I'm trying to get you to question yourself.
About anything. You can't be sure about anything. Why? You want to be my guru? Fuck you.
No.
So don't give me unsolicited advice. How's that sound for a plan? Why is it so hard? I don't care. Why is it so hard to conform to a minor standard of decorum?
I'm trying to get you to look inwardly.
What kind of a
oh really? I think you're
has
just trying
these
to make
outbursts
yourself
of rage.
Look good. You're both trying to make yourself.
Aren't you supposed
look
to be like a Zen master? Haven't all your reincarnations gotten you past the petty negative emotions of rage and anger and bitterness?
Don't you love how Domingo is now an expert on yogic masters all of a sudden?
Aren't you
all about the
presumption closer
of
to enlightenment than the plebs? But it seems like you're not.
The funny thing is that people try to assume this is basically like the Karen of intellectualism.
Look at my avatar, Jen. Look at my avatar, Jen. My avatar's face.
If I can criticize you, then that means I'm smarter than you, right?
Did you kick him out?
If the subliminal logic is if I can criticize you, therefore I have intellectual high ground over you. It's a flaw of the Socratic method. That
I'm
criticism
I'm not criticizing
good.
you. I'm not attacking you. I'm attacking
your
argument.
You have no right to do either.
I'm attacking your model.
All you have a right to do right now is understand. And you're not.
You're telling me to submit.
Right.
You're telling me to submit then.
One right. You can either understand or you can try to fight. And if you try to fight, you are submitting to your own ego, which has a desire to virtue signal that you're smart.
Do you want people to understand your knowledge, or do you want them to submit to it?
How many things are up on my blog?
Why are you evading the question?
Why are you not answering a question that is relevant and pertinent?
You're acting like Steven Crowder. Look at yourself. You're acting like Steven Crowder. We're not attacking you. We're attacking your model.
Well, they're both Canadian, Bubble. By the way, they're both Canadian.
Canadian. It's a Canadians. Those Canadian.
Fucking arrogant Canadians.
You should really question. You should question whether it's logically valid to question my model, because it isn't.
Well, I'm trying.
It makes the predictions. It makes the predictions. It makes the predictions. It makes the predictions. The other models don't. Mine is scientific. The others aren't.
Many models make predictions.
The failure of people to accept that is their own
But you refuse to publish the model because you don't believe in the validity of modern science.
It is published on my blog. There are over 100 articles on there that anybody can read at any time.
No.
And they can come and push back on my ideas on my show anytime they want.
Doing. That's what I'm doing.
The entire model is, you don't know what my model is, though. I had to explain it to you.
Yeah, that's what I let
you interrupted about 7 or 8 times, right? You interrupted
I was asking questions
7 or 8 times. So right off the bat, you think you have a right to interrupt me.
Questions are not interruptions. Questions is for me to better understand the model.
That actually is what questions are. When you haven't waited to the end, that is what questions are. They're interruptions.
You might perceive them. Might perceive them as interruptions.
Oh, okay. Yes, you're just going to explain. Okay, Swami.
My intent is not to interrupt you. My intent is to
better know your model. Bitch, you fucking stupid mad bitch.
We are so lucky that we have not just one. We have not just one, but 2 Mayavadis on the stream today. Aren't we lucky? We have people who are so wise, so advanced, that they have something to say to me.
Everybody's
about
wise in
this?
their own way. They'll get to.
Oh,
they'll
sure
get-
they are. Everyone is
eventually
wise
get
in
to
their
our
own
point.
way. Everyone's wise in their own way, but nobody knows everything. Is that right? Prove it.
Well, just saying we don't know.
But you're asserting it as fact. Isn't that
And that's-
funny? It's almost
No,
like you're under mind control.
No. Why?
It's almost
'Cause
like you can't think independently because you can't
Uh,
consider the ideas on their merits. You want to immediately jump to criticism.
I could easily just say you're under
Perhaps
control of your own
indicative of
ego.
being sick in the head. Oh, and now you're going to play amateur
No.
psychiatrist with me. That is another sign you're under mind control.
Why would that be mind control?
Because you want to
it's your
judge me
internal
so that you
feelings.
can reject the validity of my statements.
No, you're perceiving my attack on your model as an attack on you.
It's not a valid attack for the 14th time, maybe?
Well, what it is, if you won't answer my questions,
I have answered all the questions. I have given the model. You maybe didn't understand the answers, but that doesn't mean anything other than you not understanding the answers.
but your answer is like, I'd refuse to prove my model. That is your answer.
I have proven it, okay?
But
You're the one, you don't understand what a model is. You don't understand what it means to prove a model. That's the thing. Like, you don't. If you understood what it meant to prove a model, you'd
prove a model
that was the proof.
To prove a model is to take it to a lab and show it to us, step by step, and that's proving something. Not. Look, socialists can say like we proved our model by paper, but they will never take it to experiment. They know how their model ends. I want you to take your model and prove it to us. And you refuse to take that model and prove it to us.
Well, I don't know. It's making pretty good predictions right now.
It might make good predictions, but it's not proven until you take it out to the lab and show it.
Yeah, so you guys could see, people are not thinking. They're not reasoning. They're repeating things that they memorized elsewhere.
Questioning you is thinking. We have to question everything. This is the law of supply and demand.
Right.
It's the one law
repeating talking points
govern everything.
And he's accepted these talking points as true, but he can't prove any of them as true. But he just wants to keep repeating them.
Well, you can keep repeating your model and saying all these YouTubes, but like you can silence all this criticism by simply.
It's not valid criticism, is my point. You haven't helped me at all. The only thing you could have done to help things would be to ask questions and try to understand it better. But instead, you're questioning the validity of the model itself. You understand science well enough to question the validity of a scientific model that makes predictions? No, you don't. You're making the same mistake as Leonard or whatever that guy's name was on the stream last night. He thinks he knows everything about science.
Yes,
yet he's wrong about almost everything that he thinks.
Well, he
can't see
he can be wrong, but he can be wrong. He can be right. He's got the same kind of ego you do. It's fine. We all have egos.
So why are you pointing it out on me?
Because you're doing what Leo was doing right now.
No, you're doing that.
I'm not the one refusing to prove it. I'm here asking questions.
Refusing to accept what most people would consider an acceptable proof. Fact.
To just accept your theory would be faith. I can't do that. Not
you don't need faith. Did you or did you not see me show you how the DNA weaves? That's called proof.
But I've seen other models of how DNA, and there's
no other models of how DNA precipitates. I'm afraid
there is, but
prove it.
Just besides the point.
Prove it.
There isn't.
You're acting like I don't have access to
the internet,
other people's scientific results. I've looked. There's no model predicting DNA.
No, how the spiral comes about. I've seen other people's theories. Doesn't mean it's true.
Oh yeah,
I'm not saying it's true, but this is
because I just think you're basically making this stuff up at this point to try to like usurp the guru position to try to give me advice that my ego is too big. It's like, lol. The most illogical thing.
That's the thing. You can prove this is not an ego trip, and prove your
You
model.
can prove that you're
And then
not on an ego trip. Well, you're definitely
Come
on
again,
an ego
sorry.
trip. If you think you, what's your point? You're saying you're shifting the goalpost. Basically, that is a proof. It's a model. It predicts the result. We already know what the fucking result is because we know what DNA looks like. That's it.
No,
There's no more proof to meet.
It's simply a model, but it's not proven until you take it to the lab. Sure,
Science
you can say you have a model.
Disprove things. Science can only disprove things. It can't prove things.
Yes.
So you're saying go do science, which can only disprove, and prove something with something that can only disprove things. That's real smart, not?
Well, you can. The same. You can take your model, take it to the lab. If it doesn't happen,
What
it's
did I
been
just say?
disproven.
What did I just say?
Yeah, but this is your theory. We have to test your theory.
The theory gives a result that's already known. Everybody knows the DNA is in a double helix spiral.
Yeah, and I see another
My model
theories
predicts the double helix spiral. There's nothing
I
else
see
to
now-
do.
Well, I've seen other theories. It doesn't mean they're true.
No, you
have to
haven't.
prove-
Show me the other theory. Show me how the
Well,
other theory predicts DNA.
I don't have it on me, but I've seen them. It's basically like a rope, a tight rope. You ever taken taken two strings of rope, and then you tie them up? They naturally contort into the shape of DNA. How we see it, it's how we see it in life forms. It's like crinkly.
So everything is a rope, and DNA
No,
is because
it's-
of a rope.
No, I'm not saying that. This is just an example of other theories I've seen. But I'm trying to get you to look. You could be an award winner. You can like.
Is it possible?
can-
Yeah, exactly. It's like I just told you I didn't want to hear this, and you're saying stuff I told you I didn't want to hear. It's a
But
bit
if you're-
mind-boggling.
But it's just that you're refusing to prove your model.
Yeah, I'm refusing to indulge your delusions. Of course, that would be bad karma.
It wouldn't be bad karma because it would be
You're
karma
not,
if
in
you
a
did
position,
prove
you're
it.
not in a position to judge what's good or bad karma, I'm afraid.
We cannot judge. Judgment is a power granted to us all.
So we can't judge, but judgment's granted to everyone?
No, we can judge. We can judge each other. This is something given us by the law of supply and demand.
I don't think that's actually a law.
The law of supply and demand is universal. It's the only thing
It's really not.
it is.
It's really not, though.
People don't seem to realize how important that law is.
Well, if you really cared so much about how important the law was, you would have proved it rather than just asserting it as a fact.
We can observe
That's all
it.
you've
It's
done since you
observable.
come on here, is assert
It's
things as
observable in
fact.
physics. It's observable in life. You can observe it everywhere.
Yet no one has taken the time to prove it as a fundamental law of physics, so I must therefore conclude you're just full of shit.
Yeah, you can't see it. You can see it in physics, but yeah, it's not something you can.
Oh, so you can't prove it.
Wait,
But
you can't.
now
But
you're
it's not
well,
a,
yeah.
It's not a
You
sim-
can't prove
no.
your model. I've already proven my model, but yet you're giving me advice on my model. That's
Well, it's
logical.
not as simple.
Not?
Wait, what you're saying? Because you're saying the way to experiment yours is as simple as chemistry, you know. But the law of supply, the law of supply and demand is a bit esoteric.
I'm going to call it a night. I'm dozing off. I'm weak from fasting today. Nice to meet you, Bubble.
Yeah.
Hope you had a good conversation. You know, this is kind of what Jennifer enjoys.
Mhm.
You know, good way. You know, so this is the method to developing a well thought out, coherent worldview by this pillful Socratic method of trying to poke holes in each other's ideas and way we see things.
So
You
would
guys
you
are
say
welcome.
I'm doing pill pull, Doovid?
You could call it that. I mean that's Talmudic. I mean, it's similar, but
It'll be your perception.
yeah, everyone's struggling with the same harsh
Question.
conditions of the physical world, and we all benefit from understanding patterns and the truth better, and we have to go through processes like these in order to sharpen each other, through trying to explain ourselves, and so you're a good sport, Bubble. Hopefully we'll see you again, and props to you for coming on.
Thank you.
Okay, take care, Jennifer, and we'll be in touch.
See you around.
Thanks, Doowovid. Have a good sleep. Oh, looks like everyone hopped off. So it's just Domingo now.
You're just a tyrant that's reincarnating constantly across space and time. And I promise you this, Jennifer Sharp, when this body that I occupy
you'll be going into pig form for 10,000 years.
When Standard. This body of mine dies from a massive heart attack, I will seek you out in my personality.
You already have.
I will seek you out in my personality
dream,
form.
Nico?
I will
remember
find
the Terminator
your
dream?
I will find your personality.
Remember all the crying, Domingo, in the dream when you were sobbing?
I will shackle your personality to the rings of Saturn, and I will prevent you from ever occupying another physical form again.
I don't know, Domingo. That sounds like idolatry.
People will look at you.
You're not a very good Catholic, are you?
People will look at you through special telescopes. They'll look at the rings of Saturn and they'll say, "You see that? Jennifer Sharp is shackled to the rings of Saturn because Domingo condemned her." Tyrant. You're so mean to your guests.
Remember
You're such a horrible
the Terminator
host.
Dream?
You
cried in my arms. You were so terrified. Why were you so afraid?
You wish you were a Terminator.
Well, that's what you said. I didn't see myself as a Terminator. In my dream, I was just teaching my class, and some dipshit busted in on me.
You're like Skynet, and you reincarnate in microwave ovens, and you reincarnate in fucking vacuum cleaners, and people are like, "Why is my appliance gone crazy and trying to kill me?" Oh, well, that's Jen Sharp. She's just reincarnated into the technology.
Yep, scary world, isn't it? And, Christians made it a lot worse, didn't they? They basically made it that I'm operating unopposed.
Do you want people to learn your knowledge, or do you just want people to kiss your ass?
I don't want people to kiss my ass, certainly. I don't mind if people admire me, but I mean, that's their choice. Like, I certainly don't. I'm not in this for the fans. It's a burden to have
that much
devotees.
Is clear.
It's a burden to have devotees, isn't it? Kind of. That's like duty, But you seem to think I want people like whatever worshiping me. But that's because you secretly want to worship me or whatever, and you're struggling with it, and so you're projecting all your desires on me. It's like, it's all you, but
prove it.
I don't need to.
Because you can't. Because you can't prove anything.
I can make assertions.
Because you're a spiritual.
We'll see how it all shakes up.
Yeah, that's what you can do. You can make assertions, just like you accused Bubble. You make assertions. You haven't proven anything. Oh,
that's all anyone's doing.
Look in the mirror, Jen Sharp.
That's all anyone's doing. It's just a question of whose assertions are right. And you're triggered that mine are right and yours are just dog shit.
If you look up the word unproven in the dictionary, there's a picture of Jen Sharp next to the word.
Yeah, cool. So I'll be wrapping up here in just a minute unless someone else hops on because I'm not really interested in... I don't really see any point of talking to Domingo. He's a pretty bad faith actor and just sort of like...
Look at my avatar's face. That's your rage. That's your personality.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool.
Tyrant.
So as I said before, it's projection is a hell of a drug.
Usurper.
So whatever people want to say about me is probably true about them. That's actually a very interesting scientific study to just go out and see what people are saying about me, because it'll show you where their minds are focused.
Spiritual snake oil salesman.
So Domingo thinks he's a spiritual snake oil salesman. I'm inclined to agree with you, Domingo.
That you are a spiritual snake oil salesman.
Well, we all know you're just talking to yourself here, right? I'm just the intermediary for that. All conversations are ultimately with ourselves.
Prove it.
We'd like to convince ourselves otherwise, but
is this why you let me on? Because you know.
Well, I was just going to kill time to see if anybody else wanted to come on, because I wouldn't mind chatting.
You know.
I wouldn't mind chatting a little longer, but I sort of I don't really see any point to talking to Domingo. He's just a troublemaker. So I was just filling time. Why the hostility to Jen? Why indeed? Why indeed? It's a cognitive dissonance. Doo-doo-doo-doo. So most stuff pretty straightforwardly can be explained by cognitive dissonance. So it's right reactions asking why Dom has so much hate in him is speculating is sort of a question without an answer, right? Yeah, so Wonder Crab, if you want to hop on, the link's in the chat there. And we can keep it up. We got a pretty good, it looks like Love and Peace with the same avatar as A Right Reaction, which is who I assume this is.
It is me, Jen. Good morning.
It is you with your absolutely delightful voice.
I just thought, I missed these always, Jen, because of the time zone. I just got out. But what is
I'm sorry you weren't able to get on last time because I guess it was a bit too late, wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if you're East or West Coast, but yeah, absolutely time zone. But I kind of was replaying this. But this Domingo chap had the same problem with my channel. What's his deal? Why is he so? Where's the love? What's wrong with this guy? Is there a reason he just keeps coming at people? Or
I'm not sure. Someone told me he was a paid shill, so I have no idea if that's true or not. But I mean, he really does it. Like, you could tell some people have an intention. Like, there's different kinds of people, right? Like, some people have an intention to understand, and some people have an intention to be polite, and he has neither of those intentions.
Is it just normal? Is it just trolling? Because sometimes trolling crosses into a bit of you can actually feel the antagonism is actually quite hateful, right? It's not based in anything. It's just based in enjoying the process of winding people up or something. I must admit, I've just woken up, so I missed. I've been trying to replay at high speed. So, how are you anyway, Jenny?
It's just the usual. It's just the usual infinity conversation in all of its myriad forms. Welcome also to the show, Wonder Crab. Thanks for showing on video, and thanks for joining. Did you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'll be mute for 30 seconds, Jen.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, you there, Wonder Crab?
How does my mic work?
It sounds like you're coming through just fine. I'll let you know if anything changes.
Ah, swell. I wish I got in earlier. I wanted to talk to Doooovid. But that was entertaining. Yeah. That was a lot to listen to. That was a lot to process. Do you have I gotta know, is this guy you're close with this guy and it's like a very intimate.
You talking about Doooovid? You talking about Doooovid?
No, no,
we're not close at all. No. He's part of a group of people that came over to the Claire Caw stream a while back, and he sort of orbits the streams, but no, I don't know. I've sort of given him the benefit of the doubt before because he seemed to be earnestly inquiring, but I really don't think he's in good faith.
Well, you should keep him around, if not only for, he's entertaining.
He can be, which is a real shame, because he kind of, I don't know, he just seems to be getting worse these days, especially on Ralph's stream. He was on, I don't remember when that was, but he kind of wrecked your stream, Ralph. He wasn't able to just take part in the conversation. It just became this big fight with everyone. And then it was basically trying to portray it like he was the one being persecuted, and that's a bit annoying, right? When someone's like, "Oh my god," like they just antagonize you and antagonize you and antagonize you, and finally you react, and they're like, "Oh my god, you're being so mean to me." It's like, come on, let's grow up. But yeah, that's the internet for you. You know, people want to come on and blow off steam, right? So they want to have these mini fucking drama things, right? Oh my god, you hear what that person said about that person? And when people start talking about that shit, I'm like, I'm 5 minutes away from being asleep.
Well, don't get me wrong. I can do some drama. I like drama just as much as I do. I gotta know how much does your model correlate to Ken Wheeler's model? Because I hear a lot of similarity.
I mean, is his, like, from what I understand, his model is basically like history as a sort of gradually learning different lessons through its progression. Is that kind of it? Like a civilizational maturity model kind of thing?
No, he's a critic of particle physics, and his model is, I mean, not mechanical by definition, but it's about mechanistic or noumenal events. It's like he does all that Nikola Tesla ether type stuff. But that's where I originally started learning about all this. And I think I found you through either a comment on one of his videos or something like that. But yeah, it seems, especially the bit about particles themselves being a fantasy is very similar to his take.
Yeah, it's a criticism that's been levied before, right? Because you want to think of it from first principles, like, what's the best evidence we have for the existence of particles? I would argue that it's the center of mass. Like, are you familiar with mathematics at all?
No, red pill me.
I love that idea of red pilling someone on maths.
I'm going to red pill you on the center of mass question right now, young man. And it's basically in physics.
There's this crazy thing called integers, right? And they exist.
Bro, you're blowing my mind.
And in between integer numbers, sneaking irrational numbers. And then these little buggers are really creepy because they keep getting deeper and deeper, right? So, sorry, I'm just being silly. Good morning, Wonder Cloud. We haven't met.
Well, like, are you familiar with Democritus's line of inquiry of which led to the concept of the indivisible, or atomos, which is where the word atom comes from? Like, he had this thought experiment where if he took an object and divided it in two and kept dividing in two a bunch of times, you'd eventually get to an indivisible element, which he called atomos. So that's your basic birth of particle, quote unquote, like pseudo particle theory, right? Because that's kind of alluding to a particle, even though atoms aren't particles, right? We know that now, but back in the day, you could sort of see why someone might be inclined to think, well, it's just made up of a bunch of dots.
The thing I liked about Democritus was he was known as, was it the laughing philosopher, the cheerful philosopher?
Oh gosh, I have no idea.
Yeah,
I have no idea. Sorry.
Yeah. So
that's one idea, and then I think that you can assert the idea of a point particle as being something that has a physical reality in the sense that definite objects admit a unique center of mass. So, you know how you can balance things, but you have to get it right at the right point? Like, you can balance a pencil on your finger, but it's got to be at that one point, and there's only one point that will effectuate that balance. That's essentially your best argument in support of a particle existing. Does that actually substantiate a particle existing, though? It substantiates a unique point, which we can define as the center of mass, which is the point which is sort of the geometric center of all the mass, where the mass cancels itself out, right? Does that mean there's a particle, though? Right. So all I'm saying is like,
are you interested in physics or maths or philosophy? Is that your kind of thing? In cool haircuts?
He looks like he's frozen, unfortunately. I don't know if he needs to rejoin or what, but he looks frozen for the moment. He said he's interested in Ken Wheeler's theory.
Oh, okay. So he's interesting.
Well, it's like a new age. You could call it like a new age kind of.
Yeah, kind of.
If Ken Wheeler heard you call his system New Age, he would lose his mind.
Why is New Age considered the ultimate insult now?
And I'm glad you like the haircut.
It's an unprecedented model. That's what I meant by New Age. Sorry, I mean it incorporates novel ideas, doesn't it? So, doesn't that make it by definition New Age? I'm sure he doesn't want to hear that. I apologize.
Because he goes to like Woodstock and Age of Aquarius when you hear that, and he goes, "Hey, I don't want that." Sorry, my brain has.
Well, I'm just using it in the sense of like something that was invented recently.
Yeah, that's what I think. I like the word neo for that, like neo or something. I think New Age gets people a little triggered, or they get them going into the hippie thing. So
what is like Neoplatonism then? So you could say Ken Wheeler is a form of Neoplatonism because he tries to break things down all into different. It seems like you're having trouble, so maybe if you turn your video off, that might be why it's not working, or I don't know what's happening if you keep freezing.
I've had some challenges. I'm all right now.
Okay,
he is
good.
a Neoplatonist. Yeah, that's what he claims. That's what he self-identifies as, at least.
Sure, yeah. So that's fair enough, and like I don't know if I would say I agree with his theory. I'm not even sure what his model is or if he has one, but he may have some good ideas in his models. I haven't really gone through all of them. They're not really the main focus of my research. My research is mostly in like particle physics and quantum physics.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know, but I got added to that group, the Ken Wheeler group there. So you might have seen me in there from some of my comments because people do ask me questions in that group. So I'm happy to answer them. But yeah, there's some kind of it's not a very welcoming community, I find.
Well, who is these days?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. That may just be something that is endemic to modern social movements. A lot of chaos in them. Yeah, it's definitely not the only place. It's not the worst either. I mean, it's not like I'm getting nonstop attacks in the Ken Wheeler group. So I'm open to ideas like this. My own focus is like scientific models. So if you can show me a model and show me how it makes predictions, that's more what I'm interested in. To me, the Ken Wheeler model seems more speculative than testable.
Well, his model predicts the geometry of the magnetic field, and I think it also predicts the results of the dual slit experiment better
that's
than
cool.
But again, I mean, if you want to start, he has a book on magnetism that's free that everyone recommends. I really found that entertaining. But I wanted to hear more about your model. I came to Church of Entropy to learn, because before we got diverged off into this whole, well, why don't you test her? Why don't you go to why don't you go and prove it? Before we got lost on that rabbit hole, you were talking about the waveform, how the waveform will twist, and that this is the origin of RNA or DNA.
Yeah.
So what was the bit about refraction? How did refraction tie into that? Maybe you want to just start from the beginning, but.
Well, do you know what refraction is?
I'm generally familiar, but also I saw the diagram that you put up of a enclosed space, and then you have sunlight being entrapped and repeatedly cycling in on itself.
Yeah, so what that's doing is basically setting up a demonstration that it is indeed possible for something to be totally internally refracted, for light to be totally internally refracted, that is. And this is something that's been established before. So this diagram here is just an approximation. It's not really how light works, because light moves in a spherical form. So the tendency for light is just to expand as an ever-increasing sphere. So this is modeling light as a particle, basically. But I have to do that because it's not going to be visualizable without simplifying it to some degree. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if that's answering your question, but basically it's possible for light to be totally internally refracted. And if you have more light coming in all the time, i.e. from digestion, this process of total internal refraction can generate a standing waveform, i.e. a photon waveform that remains bound to a particular geometry. It's always moving, but it's moving within a particular geometry. So this is where this idea of vibration comes in. So like atoms work that way too, right? Like they have a very tiny geometry and they vibrate within that geometry, and they don't vibrate outside of it, but within the geometry in which they vibrate, they're delocalized. So they don't occupy an actual point. It's spread out as what they call a potential function. I'm trying to pull up my old diagram there that I had up before. That might help. All right, so you want to go through it step by step?
Sure.
So we have the basic rule of the theory is that everything tends towards a spherical array. The sphere is the minimum energy state, and according to the least action principle, everything tends towards the minimum energy state. So any system will tend towards a spherical array in the absence of other forces. I don't know if you accept that or if you want me to explain that more. But that's the basic. Sorry?
I'm just grabbing a pen.
Okay.
Yeah, the spherical geometry is what Ken Wheeler calls coaxial, and it has to do, in his words, with the hyperboloidal nature of the wave of light.
I don't really see it. To me, it's just a sphere, and the additional complexities, like the sphere sort of bending in on itself to make a spirally sort of shape in the middle, a torus, if you will. That's a secondary effect of compression of a field. But yeah, so your basic idea is that everything emulates the sphere because the sphere is the minimum energy three-dimensional shape. So photons have known qualities, and one of those qualities is expansion. So the photon will tend to expand in a spherical shape. But if it hits a boundary that it can't get past, it's going to reflect off the boundary. So what it's going to do is expand into itself. So it's still expanding, but since it has a boundary, that expansion is happening in the opposite direction of its original emanation. Does that make sense? Hello?
Sorry, so it's
I
reached
just
a
don't wanna lose
barrier,
you.
and it's reached a barrier, and it's expanding inward as the only pressure modality that it's.
Light keeps moving.
pressure
Light
mediation.
essentially has intrinsic motion, so it's always going to move. It's always going to expand. So even if it has a barrier for its expansion, it's going to continue to expand into itself perpetually.
Right, inertia will terminate, right.
Well, the inertia is the vibration. It never stops vibrating, so it never stops expanding, even if it's bounded. It's just perpetually expanding into itself.
You'll have to excuse me because I'm totally autistic about the Ken Wheeler model, and basically I can't understand anything unless I at least pass it through that filter once.
Okay. Yeah, so we've gotten all the way to the sphere expanding to the boundary. Is that cool?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey,
And
just
then
for a second, that shows some really serious epistemological commitment, man. if everything has to go through the Wheeler model. Sorry.
Well,
yeah, no kidding, eh?
I've spent too much time on YouTube. Let's just say
It's
that.
the sunk cost fallacy, right? Hey, I'm getting good at these fallacies. Ah.
Yeah. Hey, the operating maxim of the CIA is the most committed win. So carry on.
That's why I'm here, right?
So I don't know if this is really going to relate back to Wheeler's model. This is just a basic physical model, but the third step is that the waveform, which is perpetually expanding into itself because of this boundary, will saturate its energy near the radius, because that is the minimum energy state, right? Because if it always wants to expand, the tendency of it will be to be expanded. But it also wants to move, so it will start to spin, which is what sets up this initial vibration. The bound energy will eventually create a potential difference and an associated charge, which will split the light field up into subcomponents. And what happens at that point is that you have half the volume in two different components. So that's step 6. Now, these two components are also subject to the laws of entropy. So we already know that they're individually going to tend towards a spherical array. And we also know that the array of the two light waveforms is going to itself tend to be conscribed to another sphere. And so it's going to vibrate within a sphere. And so you model that with step 7, which is a packing of spheres inside a sphere. So to get 2 spheres inside a sphere, that will occupy 1/4 of the volume. So if you split a sphere in 2, that will create a larger sphere than your original bounded volume. And that is what is your photonic standing field. Now, the higher the energy that's coming into this refractor, the more individual light waveforms it can split up into. The more energy, the more it can split into. There's really no limit. It can split all the way to like individual photons, right? Like a shimmery type thing, but that would require a lot of energy. So in the lowest requirement of energy is theoretically 2, because each division of the waveform requires energy, right? We get the energy from all the motion of light, but to separate it still requires this initial energy, right? So naively, we would assume that splitting the field in 2 is actually the minimum energy solution. But as it turns out, the radius is significantly smaller when you split it into 4 than when you split it into 2. And that's because it's more efficient packing of light in when it's divided in 4 than just in 2. Like in 2 only has 1/4. It only fills 1/4 if you divide the light form in 2. So here packing density is 0.25, and for 3 it's 0.29. For 4, it's already up to 0.36. So you're getting a lot better packing density, which means the size of the effective radius generated by splitting the light up is much smaller. So that's another factor, right? It's not just how many splits there are within the field. It's also how big the resulting field is, because it takes more energy to make a bigger field, no matter how many splits there are. So we have this local minimum at 4. So that's a prediction right there. That says that your local minimum is a 4-chambered sphere inscribed in another sphere. Well, guess what? That's exactly how the heart works. So this will basically tell you why the heart is the way it is, because of 4 spheres packed inside another sphere vibrating is the minimum energy solution to a static photon field. But the most important thing here is that even if the waveform, the light waveform, is divided into infinity parts, it still is the same size as the original container. So the size is actually only varies within a very small range, the size of that photon waveform. So it's a photostatic field, i.e. it is always between 2 particular known sizes. So we can actually predict its approximate location, coinciding with this 4-chambered waveform, which is going to be your basis for how the heart pumps. And then on top of that, you have a 2-chambered waveform, which is the lungs, and another 4-chambered waveform, which is the brain, right? Because the brain can be broken down into 4 parts. I don't know if I've lost you guys or not, but hopefully that was somewhat illuminating.
Well, you lost me a little bit, I'll be honest. But it cleared up more.
It's just basically building up biology from light waveforms. And because biology is based on light waveforms, it actually does line up with what we observe. So if you look at, how people understand biology materialistically, they can't predict the heartbeat, can they? They can't predict the shape of the heart, can they? It's just there because evolution. It's like that's not actually telling you any information.
More evolution or more science of the gaps, right?
People say my model is God of the gaps. It's like, no, I'm closing the gaps. I'm telling you how it works, aren't I?
I always throw back more science of the gaps. You mean you're just waiting for some novel hypothesis in the future, right? That sounds like an act of faith to me. So
it's the worst cult ever because they think they know everything and they can't learn anything. It's so sad because it's like
they put their mind, they allow their
conviction.
consciousness to be put into a box of their own definition, and then they stand there like a little child who's just wet his pants, looking all proud and happy, right? And you go, but you just limited yourself, and they go, yeah, it's my explanatory power. I don't know. Sorry, I've just woken up, so I'm a bit silly. But I had a different question. Sorry to interrupt you for Jen, because now that we're in a less hostile environment, I apologize if my chat can be a bit aggressive at times because they're mainly political people. But so what do you think of this general idea? Because you're a physics chick, and I'm not a physicist, but obviously I'm a keen fan. That if you take the Vedas, right? So if you take the unified field and you work upwards, right? So I take my basic matter fields, my gauge fields, gravity fields, and I end up with my superstring. If you line them up, they layer exactly over the Vedic states of consciousness. So when Doooovid was on last, he was talking about things like the multiple truth hypotheses and stuff. And I wonder if one can defend the claim, especially if you're pantheistic, that really the Vedas and the early Indian insights actually got there quicker. They just didn't have the lingua franca to explain it, right? Because there's no way, as a computer scientist, I don't really do coincidences, for example. That's one of the things we don't do. We see a pattern, we go, coincidence is just a pattern waiting to be explained, right? So if you line up the Vedas, they just align perfectly. The brain states of waking, consciousness align perfectly with the field theories. So what do you think of that? Do you think that possibly that the dharmic fates had already, I don't know what the expression be, stumbled upon?
Well, I don't want to say they stumbled upon it. I will say that the Veda is the source of all knowledge, and I'll stand by that.
Whoa, okay, stronger claims then, Jen. Okay, so because that's quite interesting, isn't it? That I mean, how else could you, after about 2,000 years of reductionist science, can we come across our latest science and have it just look like, just visually at a glance, just line up perfectly? For me, that's just quite airy and uncanny, right? Is that kind of something you think of that way? Or?
Yeah, definitely. I think all knowledge comes from the Veda.
Okay,
I think that the failure to accept that is going to lead to incomplete knowledge, and I've got basically nothing but proof for my assertion.
Yeah, because I find that quite interesting. Because I'm obviously as a computer scientist, we've got these other kind of worldviews, right? But this thing just always blows my brains. I always look at it and go like, it's just.
Well, why do you think they invaded India so many times?
I'm sorry, say again.
Why do you think they invaded India so many times?
Probably many reasons. First of all, the Indians being generally quite peaceful chappies, but that notwithstanding.
It was one reason and one reason only. It was the wealth of the motherland.
Yeah, to get
Period. They wanted the gold because they're a bunch of fucking pirates, okay? Now, the question then becomes, why was India so wealthy?
Oh, that's another thing as well, isn't it?
Well, that's the important question, right? Why did the pirates insist on pillaging India and oppressing its wonderful ancient science and religion? Because they had a lot of answers, and that gave them a lot of wealth.
So if I can share my
their religion was correct.
This kind of picture, I think, is the one I mean, right? So if you don't mind sharing the screen, you'll be able to see this diagram is the one that gets a computer scientist bent out of shape, right? Because what we have over here is pretty much the standard model of physics.
But standard model physics is wrong.
Well,
right? So try to link it up to Veda is not going to work.
Yeah, but this is the strange thing. Yeah, let's assume we think it's incomplete, and all of it could be thrown out.
No, it's literally disprovable because there are no particles, and it's a particle theory. So it's based on something that doesn't exist.
Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate it. It could be, but even in its current manifestation, let's just say a new standard model arrives in a couple of decades, whatever. But the current standard model's alignment is remarkable, right? It aligns perfectly on the right-hand side with the Vedic states. It aligns these Vedic states, of course, we know from Dharmic practices, also line up to brain states of consciousness, to waking, sleeping, lines up perfectly with the transition from the matter to the gauge superfields. And even if you look at its alignment numerically over string theory, it lines up perfectly with the structure of the superstrings. So I look at this stuff as a computer science, I go, whoa, something deeper is going on here, and you don't know what it is, do you, Mr. Jones, right? So this is the thing I thought at some point I would love to explore with people like you and Doooovid and people of pantheistic, because for me it's kind of like a bit boggling, right? So it's not quite obvious how that would be, right? Without having something like you say, either throughout the standard model, right, or as you would posit, start with the axioms that the Vedas are the source of.
We just have to go back to the scientific method. We don't have to go back to the Veda. These people aren't ready to go back to the Veda. You know that. I mean, even you're sitting there saying you want to execute me for not affirming your fake God, right? So it's like you're not at a point where you can learn direct from the Vedas. Let's just get past that right now. But we can use science. We can use science.
Totally in the chat.
It works. The thing is, science works. You just have to apply it correctly. That's why the axioms are so important,
so
right?
What do you think the problems are with the scientific method in of itself? Do you think it's because it has an open-ended loop for pending?
The biggest issue is peer review.
Oh, peer review.
There's no quality control. So it is too easy to make peer review sort of political popularity contest.
Yeah, so you're saying the basic idea is because I need a consensus, all 9 out of 10 people could, or 10 out of 10 reviewers could.
Who may be receiving money from people who have other priorities.
So corrupted reviews. But even what's not corrupted?
Self-corrupted. It's self-corrupted because I don't have any peers. So who's going to tell me that my model's right? If I don't have peers, who's going to tell me I'm right? I have to tell myself that I'm right, and then I have to tell everybody else that I'm right. If I don't have any peers, that's the only way to do it.
And there's another problem, of course, right? Because if all 10 people agreed, all 10 people would still be wrong, right?
Well, look how many people agree with the Big Bang. It's not even scientific. It's a singularity. A singularity is not a scientific thing because it's a thing where cause and effect breaks down. Science is predicated on cause and effect as much as people want to say different for whatever fucked up reasons. It's not, this is going against the axiom of science. By definition, you're outside of science when you do that. Doesn't matter if you say it's science. If it contradicts the axiom of science, it's not science.
Oh yeah, I don't believe the scientific method is some. See, as a computer scientist, the scientific method is just an algorithm. Type 1, type 2 errors are algorithms. Null alternative hypothesis, all these are just variations of algorithms. So I look at the scientific method as a class of algorithms, and all classes of algorithms have limits, right?
It's a method. Yeah, it's a method that can falsify things effectively, but it can't prove anything because you need pramanas to prove things. Yeah. Do you know what those are?
Yeah. I mean, your acceptance of the
There's no equivalent to pramanas in the West, so there's no way to prove anything. So basically, it becomes a matter of what theory that hasn't been proven is the most widely circulated.
So effectively, it's subjective in its deepest sense, right? So there's no pramana.
It's extremely subjective. Yeah, it's just the whims of whoever's writing the checks.
So do you think it's part of the Western condition to be brittle and fragile and assuming that such things are holy and sacred, right? So that it leaves you to be, so that's very anti-Indian, right? To be very strongly assertive about something is usually seen as brittleness, right? You haven't got that true means of knowledge, right? You're taking a means of knowledge of being, this is hard and cold and concrete, like
I'm sorry. I think I lost you. I lost the thread of what you mean. What do you mean? I'm not being Indian enough because I'm being too assertive?
No, not you personally. I'm saying if one is Western, for example. I don't mean anyone could be anything, right? I don't believe that.
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble understanding what you mean by what you're saying. That's why I was rephrasing it. Yeah. I'm not trying to straw man you or anything.
Oh, no, I know you're not. No. So what I'm saying is, if you look at the difference between an Indian philosophical approach to a Western one, right, at least a modern Western one, is one thing that permeates the Western thinking is absolutism of some form, absolute belief in my knowledge. Whereas the pramana is exactly the opposite. The way you get the knowledge and how you got the knowledge is as important as the knowledge in of itself.
Yeah, that's why we've been losing, right? Because we can't counteract this Western piratic absolutism. Oh, that's such a good one. Piratic absolutism. I'm going to use that.
Note to self, reuse that later. Yeah,
well, it's like yogis curse the West for invading the country. It's like, obviously, don't underestimate the strength of a yogic curse. That's fucking stupid.
No, I don't. Yeah, because I think it's quite interesting. Because I'm very interested in the work of other people currently in constructed theory and everything else that seems to be, having taken the universal Turing machine to the next limit. And if you continue letting your mind run, it's almost like there's a what's the word? You're going to have to somehow be complicit in the thing that you're doing, which is a very Eastern idea, right? The idea that you can't separate the observer and the observed. You can't separate your being in the world, to use a Heidegger's expression, from the world itself. But the Western approach is absolutely separate. You must be detached from the world. The thing I write down as an equation must stand without the thing that wrote the equation, right? So there seems to be a fundamental I want to say battle, but the ideas seem fundamentally at odds with each other, right? One is trying to create this thing separate from oneself, and then one looks at it like the wave-particle duality, or the area circle, or Schrodinger's.
Yeah, the belief that separation implies accuracy is uniquely Western. True.
Yeah, which I think, in a sense, must be its Achilles heel, right? Because it must limit.
It's not just its Achilles heel, it's its greatest strength. It's the reason we didn't come up with calculus, because it was one of our weaknesses. We were too samyama-ish, if you take my meaning. Right? So it's like, it's not, it's to me, it's seeming more and more like everything kind of has a cost and a benefit. Yeah. So one of the benefits of this manner of thinking is stuff like calculus. And I don't need to state the values of calculus. It stands on its own merits, right? Like who can do anything without needing to invoke calculus, at least on some level, right? I mean, if we didn't know calculus, we wouldn't have. Do you agree that computers as they exist now wouldn't exist without calculus?
No. Well, they wouldn't be of the intellectual history, but not in the intellectual discipline. They owe themselves to math, pure math and logic without calculus.
Yeah, I'm basically arguing calculus as a necessary condition for computers as we know them. Not sufficient, but necessary.
I think they were necessary in the transition that got us to Gödel, Hilbert, and Turing. Yes, without calculus, we would have never had Hilbert, Gödel, or Turing. So it really gave us
a basis for thinking in a purely abstract way. We just are now realizing that this pure abstraction isn't true, because the Vedic axioms are true. The presumption of sameness is the correct axiom, not the presumption of difference. We don't even know if we can get difference, right? Well, we have to axiomatize the thing we know we can have, which is sameness. And they don't do that in the West. They axiomatize that it's possible to have non-sameness, right? It's possible to have an objective material diagram of something. That's their basic axiom.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is, given that we're racing towards, increasing qubit complexity, capacity in quantum computing, we already now know the limits of the computational method. So we already know that's why we have constructed theory now coming out of physics, right? I'm so hoping to tease David Deutsch to let me interview him. But if you imagine that, then it looks like if we are somehow embedded within the universe, I'm going to use things that might be pantheistic friendly terms, then it looks like everything we think and we come up with can't be separated from the thing that is thinking it, right? And therefore
all separations are synthetic. That's why it's Vishista Advaita, not just pure Advaita. Yeah. Because you're always using your discernment to do the dualism, right? You have to invoke dualism, because dualism is the basis of contrast, and contrast is how we understand concepts. Yeah. Separability is intrinsic to the understanding of concepts, because you have to know where one concept ends and another begins, right?
Yeah, how to categorize, yeah.
And this is where the Indian approach is both the best and the worst, right? Because it has the doshas, it has the gunas, it has a bunch of systems that do that, but it doesn't lend itself to this Western manner of thinking so easily.
No, it doesn't, and I think it's quite interesting when the two sort of meet, right, in a strange way, because it is literally something you've got. It can't be both for sure, and it's got to. If it's one or the other, then there must be another option that transcends both, right?
The option that transcends both is the Vashishtadvaita, where it is you accept that it's Advaita, non-dualism, i.e. Axiomatized sameness, but you also accept that in order to get information out of your system, you have to use synthetic dualism, i.e. little asterisk, we know it's not really there, but we're saying it's there because that's the only way we can make sense of anything. Because it's a more, think of it as degrees of realness. Supreme, grand, ultimate reality, sameness. But that tells us that's tautological, right? So it's good enough for some monk in a cave who just wants to keep saying the name of Krishna for all time, right? Maybe the fact that everything is essentially the same is enough for him, but for people who are secular, it's not enough, right? I think we can agree on that.
Absolutely.
If that was enough, we'd just be sitting down chanting. We wouldn't be having this conversation.
Scientist, the philosophy for me has always been the things that led up to the birth of Turing, which is basically the frustrations of Rousseau, Wittgenstein, Hilbert, etc., and Popper. And therefore, for computer scientists, it's easy. We just start. We assume this idea of the three-world model, right? So I assume Popper's right. I assume there's a physical existence, there's an abstract existence, and then there's a conscious existence that abstracts and reifies in that constant dance. These three modes, if you like, or worlds of Popper align perfectly with the formal maths of a Turing machine. So that a Turing machine is just a way of uniting the idea that there's a physical world, an abstract world, and a conscious world that is in a co-dance. But that also lines up with Indian thinking perfectly, right? So then you get this strange idea that is there the equivalent mapping onto a onto a Turing machine that also says that, yeah, we're kind of part of the things that we are, and the things we think are part of the things that come into being because we thought what we thought, and you can't rip them apart. You can't take the three words and take
we can't rip them apart, but we can rip them apart in a way that will preserve some of the information. We can't rip them apart and preserve all the information. We can rip them apart and preserve some information.
Yeah, exactly. I think if you rip them apart, you get a slice of it.
Exactly. And the idea is that you have to reconstruct your understanding of reality from multiple slices.
Yeah, and that's where you get into the good stuff, context theory and all that stuff. But I don't want to disturb Wonder Crab with his fantastic flock of seagulls haircut. Probably a different generational reference, but a flock of seagulls pioneered your haircut 25, 30 years ago, Wonder Crab. So it is a cool haircut. When is this?
I'll take it.
I'm just going to get a drink. I'll be back in like 20 seconds. Okay. Is that okay, you guys?
Yeah, no worries.
I'll be right back.
You know, I actually gave myself this haircut.
Oh, okay. So what's your story then, man? Are you kind of like into philosophy, maths, physics, new fashion?
I started, like I said, with Ken Wheeler and physics, and then I got into politics and all that, and now I'm I guess back into more into physics.
Okay.
I was a fan of JF for a while, the biologist, and he's got some interesting stuff out there.
Yeah.
But if anyone wants to check out the channel, it's the Crabcast. We post intermittently.
Okay, Crabcast. Okay, let me try to find it. I'll sub you that. I have a channel, but it's mainly
the message is love. The message is log off. The message is become Ewok, techno, Amish.
Did you say the Crabcast? I'm trying to find it.
Crabcast, yeah, it should come up if you look up Crabcast.
I'm back, you guys. Sorry about that.
I'm not shamelessly plugging my channel.
It's okay. Go ahead, plug away. We like to help people promote their channels on Church of Entropy. We welcome all people.
including your continuous fans like Domingo and stuff who just sit there slapping you up all day from the chat, right?
Well, this is the thing. It's like they don't realize that hate is linearly dependent on love. It's like, if you're going to spend that much time thinking about me, why not make yourself feel good in the process?
I'm going to change my avatar to be Must Love Dom, just to give him something to challenge him. No, he did come on with on my show, and Jesus Christ, it took about an hour or two to get rid of his anti-Semitism, his Jew hatred, his absolute idiocy, like Holocaust denial, in the presence of overwhelming evidence. I mean, you know, and I look at creatures like this, and I go, wow, it's a particular psychiatric state that gets you so obsessed that you actually lose even like just an average grip of reality, right? I mean, you know what I mean? Some people, and that's the internet for you, isn't it? It gets people into these strange mental states that I think are quite bizarre. I'm not like this. I'm not that kind of person. It's very strange for me to relate. So anyway, we must all love Tom. So yeah, okay. So you went into physics.
I can tell you how to relate. So you love computer science, right? What is it that you love about it?
I love it in a sense because it was one of my things. I guess I was going to be a mathematician, and I was really into number theory and stuff. I was really excited we're going to Trinity to study that. And then I guess I saw that computation can animate mathematics. So
that's really poetic. That's like poetic right there. Excuse me, I just have to wipe a tear from my eye. It's just allergy.
But yeah, so I thought once we could animate mathematics, I thought, wow, we could have not just an explanation that was like, you know, basic maths, but it could actually be something that was alive. So I saw it as something that was living as opposed to something that was inanimate. And then I was hooked. And then I just disappointed my maths teachers by turning down any attempt to study mathematics. I kept saying things like, but maths is dead, whereas computational science is living. So yeah, I literally think of it as, so in a deeper sense, I think it's going to be an essential tool to be able to stretch and understand consciousness in its deepest sense, because physics is derivative from abstraction, right? So without maths and computer science, you don't get physics. You need your descriptors, right? So, okay, computer science is just maths, right? So given that we are now having descriptors, then the question becomes, what are the descriptors of the universe? What are the descriptors of consciousness? What are the limits? What is consciousness beyond comprehension? So what is an intractable algorithm? What's the beauty of something that the only way to know it is to live it, i.e. the only type of computation that can halt is a computation that runs. So these kind of things open up really interesting views of the universe. So that's what kind of got me there.
Yeah, so you're returning to the source of consciousness. You're contemplating your own existence.
Yeah, and computer science helps a lot.
You're on the path of transcending the nature of what makes you you, and what role that plays in the greater universe. And that is a healthy and wonderful thing to do. The problems happen. So this is coming back to the Domingo thing. Why is Domingo so fixated with all of this quote unquote anger and hatred? Is that the mind is spherical, essentially. So you're operating in a spherical coordinate system, and spherical coordinate systems don't operate like the Cartesian plane. So right now what I have is a animation of a spherical coordinate system. Oh, nice. And that's what happens when you back away from the house. You're close to the house, then you start backing away. What happens to the house as you back away?
Yeah, you're projecting onto inside of a sphere.
It becomes a giant ceiling that takes up the entire sky. So this is why denial of an object of fixation causes the object of fixation to become a giant boogeyman hanging on the ceiling, bat style, spooking you out and filling your thoughts with dread. And that is where Domingo's at right now. He's got this boogeyman house that he's trying to back away from, but he can't because he's trapped in the same mind as his conception of it.
You're actually firing multiple geometric grenades here, right? But also, oh, it's super funny. That is. But you know,
the West gets its first taste of the Surdashan chakra.
As funny as Fox. I was swearing. Yeah. But and sometimes it depends where I usually think, one must abstain or avoid antagonizers. And then I think, what if you stood there? Because obviously my faith demands love. And you just stood there and just kept bombarding him with a shed load of love. Would he be able to take the love assault? Or would he, like you say, run away from the house or just lie on the floor in a plane and see the house as a massive projected spherical dome crushing him?
I think he's got a game, right? Because it's like he always has a vector of assault. It's like either you're Fed posting or you don't hate the Jews enough, right? So between those two extremes, he can basically criticize anybody. So he's got himself a little grift where everybody's wrong, and he can criticize anybody on those two bases.
Yeah, the Jew hatred was quite. I mean, because of my politics, I'm around lots of those, but his was at a level that was absolutely glorious. It was just denying all reality, like absolutely. When you have an only truth hypothesis, I just made that one up, Jen. If I have an only truth hypothesis, then Dom has an only truth hypothesis. Any piece of evidence is just immediately either rejected or ejected if it complies to the Jews did it. Right? So if you start with the only world hypothesis is the axiom one, the Jews did everything, then any piece of evidence that doesn't line up with the Jews did everything just gets him rattled, right? I might have to bounce in a minute, actually. My fairer half is just stirred. So. Sorry, Dom.
Well, I mean, it's the house metaphor. It's like we're not describing the same object, because even though the house is still a house, he perceives it vastly differently.
Yeah, he does.
So it's like it's hard to communicate with people when they're certain that you're wrong. So they're basically not interested in anything that you have to say, right? So that's the point where to me, it's like there's no point in communicating. Like, I didn't really entertain them for that long today because I just don't really see there as being a point. Like to me, the conversation we're having right now seems good because it's actually going somewhere, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm open-minded. I'm sorry for on my channel, if my chats, my mods are the interest is predominantly politics and stuff, and Dom tried his luck, and then he just got booted and banned very quickly by people for just unconditional Jew hatred. Is not really a good look in politics, right? It's kind of like,
well, a lot of people have a lot of issues. I just try to acknowledge people when they're behaving well and ignore the bad behavior or ban it if I have to. Because like if someone's bad behavior is like derailing other people from having a good time, then it kind of becomes counterproductive to the whole idea of having a community, right?
It's pointless when you actually kind of have a conversation as well, right? And you're actually trying to talk about something sensible, and one little kid in the corner just keeps screaming, "It's the blues, it's the Jews." And after a while, like, did you notice we're talking about physics? It's the Jews. The Jews made up Newton's laws. You're like, okay. How about quantum mechanics? The Jews came up with. After a while, you think, okay, throw the kid out of the class, right? So,
well, it's not really, relevant to the discussion, is it? It's like you can make it relevant to the discussion if you want to, but then that says more about you than the fact of the matter, right? The fact of the matter is that we're talking about abstract ideas, and we can separate those from their ethnic origins, and maybe it's helpful to do that in science.
You think you could do so if you had an IQ that represented a positive integer, right? You think, there's a good chance you should be able to separate.
Well, it's much easier. That's the thing. Like energetically, it's much easier just to have your boogeyman good guy model, right? Everybody is going to tend towards that model because it's energetically less efficient. It's much easier just to think, what I represent is essentially right, and what the other side represents is essentially wrong, and that's just going to be my operating assumption. Reality, it doesn't operate that way. It's just a simplified model that when it's wrong, it's really wrong, right?
Yeah, and that's the stuff. I mean,
taken to its logical conclusion, it's like you're going to be dismissing a lot of stuff that basically out of hand, you may regret that, right?
Well, my biggest problem with the scientific method and all Western philosophy based on the scientific method, and as I say, I'm a theoretical computer scientist, is what I call the science of the gaps.
they seem to have no emotional, psychological issue with saying, I don't understand this, but I'll get to it later. I find that position
the argument is like, we can't understand consciousness because it's subjective and science is objective. I think that's the basic argument.
Yeah,
science is meant to be an objective thing. And so if you introduce subjectivity, you are being unscientific. But is that really a good assumption? Because subjectivity, it would appear, operates on a logical basis, even if we don't necessarily know what that basis is, because we have to take time to understand it. It would seem anti-science to presume we didn't operate on a logical basis, given that everything in the universe has the causal logic behind it.
Yeah, this is it, isn't it? Because some people, one school of camp, I was watching something recently, believe, okay, what's his name was, sorry, there's a car going by, I apologize, just a second, sort of revving into the engine. It's that with the Chalmers and with the hard problem, they think one school view says, look, if we can eventually master quantum quality of geometry, and we have some descriptor that gives you subjectivity as some manifold in all 16 dimensions of the quality of geometry, I have an explanation of the subjective. There's another school that goes, there's nothing here to see, there's nothing to solve. It's a problem that comes about because of dualism. And there's a third view that says, you're never going to solve this problem, exactly what you're saying, because you've got an objective tool for subjective, a problem. There is no objective answer to subjectivity. They're fundamentally orthogonal concepts, right? So I'm not sure what's going to come out. I guess we'll wait in 10, 15 years. We'll know enough about quantum qualia to see if that...
Well, we have to understand how axiomatizing objectivity limits understanding of objectivity. Because axiomatizing the real number line is actually limiting objectivity because there's no analog to the real number line in reality.
Yeah.
In reality, things are not infinitely, you can't subdivide things infinitely many times.
But this is where computer science really helps me, because for me, my computer science brain is quite easy. I've just, if I took an irrational number and you say, hey, there's no way to predict the nth digit of an irrational number by axiomatic mathematics, right? I can't tell you what the nth digit of E is. And from computer science, it's really easy. These are classes of problems that need you to live through the process to get to the result. So the way to get the nth digit of pi is to compute all n digits. There is no heuristic. There is no descriptor shorter than the n digits being computed by any choose your favorite computation method of pi. And then that gets to the problem where the objectivists get really upset, or the Western mind gets upset because it needs an answer that's objective, right? It can't accept the process of you must go through the process to get that.
Yeah, the objective answer is you're part of the universe.
Yeah, your computation is the answer. The result of your computation is linked to the computational process. There is no heuristic. There's no precede descriptor, right? Which again seems to rub up objectivists and.
Well, they want dualism, right? They want a categorical dualism between their models and their subjectivity. Yeah. And the categorical sameness of the universe precludes that on the fundamental level. But even if it's not true on the fundamental level, the models it creates are still quite useful because it's reality adjacent. I mean, you could argue it's reality adjacent, right? It's like subjectivity is one way and you're going to be reality adjacent. Objectivity is another way and you're going to be reality adjacent. And your better picture of reality comes from understanding both methods. As many methods as you can, because each of those is a slice of the total picture.
You might coin the phrase methodological entanglement, then, right? Right? You need some sort of entanglement just to be able to do it. But it looks like it's time for my walk to the bakery in the morning in Berlin.
Yeah, I'll probably wrap it up pretty soon.
It looks like lovely blue skies with a vapor trail to all of those looking at Germany.
Oh, what a beautiful day! Enjoy that one sunny day you're going to get this year.
Not a brilliant.
Just teasing.
Again. Hey, nice meeting you, Wondercraft. I'll sub to you guys. Bye-bye.
See you later.
Thanks for having me, Jen. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Hopefully you can come back again and we can talk about this stuff some more. It's been interesting.
Yeah, I've got a lot of questions for Doovid. Maybe I can prepare a little better for next stream as a last minute.
I mean, most days he'd be more than happy to pick your ideas apart with a fine-tooth comb and go through his usual shtick. I just think today he was fasting for a bit, so he got ultra tired. But next Sunday, if not sooner, you can definitely join up with us again, and we'll You'll be able to ask him all your questions.
I'll
That
be
should
here.
be a lot of
Thanks
fun.
to the audience. And God bless.
Yeah, God bless you too, man. Nice to meet you. Thanks everybody for joining us. Really appreciate that. And Doooovid, the co-host, it's been a good one. Yeah, so thanks for giving us a chance and take a part of the conversation. So hopefully we can all get a little bit better at communication in the process, rather than just doubling down on our familiar methodologies, which may have some range of utility, but we may also want to give ourselves methodologies that have other ranges of utility to maximize the ranges of utility over which our statements are useful. Thanks everyone again, and we'll talk to you next Sunday, if not sooner. Hopefully be able to check out a couple streams this week, but I don't have anything planned. But as always, if anyone's interested, it looks like I might actually get to stream with Aaron, who I think has one of the better voices out there, better radio voices out there. I always used to catch his show when he would do it. So if he's looking to get back into the game, I'm more than happy to facilitate that. So I think it would be cool to like just go from the ground up of wherever you're at and what you know and build from there. So like get with the functions and then the derivatives. But mostly what we want to do is get to geometry, because that's what's going to help get the brain back to 100%, is that intentional visualization of these simple forms. So like one of the types of questions would be you're pouring salt and it's forming a cone, and we want to know at what rate the height is changing, given that the volume is changing at one rate. At what rate is the height changing? We figure out that answer using calculus, and it's a great method. It's basically like it's like what Sudoku does, but it's better than Sudoku because there's a limited amount of visualization in Sudoku. But with calculus, you're really using your whole faculties because you're visualizing actual literal geometries, which can have increasing degrees of complexity. So if you want to get more difficult or challenging visualizations to push yourself further in improving your capacity just to think in general, you just pick successively more challenging formulas and their representative geometries. You try to visualize those, right? Like electromagnetic field, those are modeled with sinusoids. So that's more complicated than a sphere because the sinusoid goes on forever. But yeah, we'll do it at your pace. And I've been teaching science and math and stuff to people in, grade school to high school, to people who were injured on the job, who are going back to school, who were, your age and even older. So I've got tons of experience that if you're willing to put in the work, and I do think it can be fun. Like, yeah, it is a discipline thing, but who says that discipline things can't be fun? And at the end of the day, you do get those benefits because it really does. It's like a muscle, you work it up, and the next thing you know, you can visualize things with extreme precision. And that's ultimately what logic is all about, is visualizing the train of causes. So it's a bit like a tree diagram, and then describing that chain in the most convincing way. And obviously people are going to push back on it. So then there's this whole new domain of mapping out false arguments and then ascertaining the best way to push back on those false arguments. And you got to get the practice with that. But ultimately, your fundamental, most important things that you want to be thinking about doing are imagining and discerning. Those are opposite in a way processes, right? Imagining is an expansion. If I say imagine a sphere, your mind starts to work on simulating a perception of a sphere, right? So that's what we want to do. We want to put as much simulated perception into these abstract objects because they're what assist us in visualizing more complex logic, right? So coming back to what Doooovid always talks about with the chunking, hard limit on what we can chunk simultaneously. So a lot of us get sort of overwhelmed by complexity and just give up. That's why a lot of people can't plod their way through calculus. It's just too much complexity. So what the teaching process I'll be going through is just to break the complexity down to an algorithm. So the goal here will be that Aaron will be able to solve a calculus problem without me being there. and he'll like be able to turn around and teach his kids. So that's my approach to teaching. The goal in the long run is to have you be able to turn around and teach it also. So we want it to be a back and forth where if something's not clear, stop me, and we'll stick on the thing that's not clear until it's clear. And I think this is a great public service. So I do appreciate him being open to this, because this will help a lot of people, because I don't think everybody has a supreme familiarity with the ins and outs and subtleties of calculus and how exactly it applies to physics, which is really the most important part, right? When can we take these mathematical constructs, which only exist in the ideal realm, and pull them into the concrete and have that actually mean something? So yeah, Domingo, I think we're going to prove you wrong. So screw you, buddy. And I guess we'll see who ends up being right in the long run. And I'm pretty positive about it, because like he, you know, he's got a good starting point. Like, he's not a dumb guy, and he's on the path of self-improvement to some extent. So I think it'll work out. And thanks for saying that it sounds like a great show, Oneness. I do think it'll be interesting, because calculus is always fun. I still remember when I first started doing calculus in high school, just sort of falling in love with it. It's pristine beauty and precision, and how the ideas all link up together to give you an extremely efficient computational process, because the simplicity of an integral is it's like one step versus like 100 plus steps to divide the thing up into a bunch of subcompartments. So we'll have a chance. We'll have a chance to go through all of that in our stroke recovery calculus program, which I'm really looking forward to, as well as future shows where we'll continue to talk about the topics we always go into: consciousness, theology. Oh, looks like Domingo's back. But I think we'll just wrap it up for today. I don't think I can take another go around, because basically I already know how that one's going to end before it begins. Thank you so much for joining. See you again real soon.